Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the town of Oakville. I don't believe we have any regrets tonight. This is a full house in more ways than one, here and at the other side of the room. And Council, I'll now look for declarations of pecuniary interest. Madam Clerk, there are none tonight. Council, we need to resolve in a committee of the whole so that we can enjoy a relaxed rule environment to consider these matters. Councillor Chisholm moves, and I need a second. Councillor Giddings, all in favor, and that's carried, and we are now in committee of the whole. There are no consent items tonight, and our first item is a public hearing item, a public meeting report for the zoning bylaw amendment for McLaughlin College. This particular meeting on this item is an information gathering meeting. It is not a decision-making meeting. And we will be canvassing the public for comments, and the word public includes everybody, including proponents and opponents. And we will be listening to staff summarize the matter. And if we could turn our attention now to Mr. Heck, who is the manager of current planning. We can set the framework for what we're going to be discussing. Mr. Hecht?
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. This is a statutory public meeting as required by the Planning Act to obtain public and council feedback on a proposed zoning amendment application that's submitted by McLaughlin College. McLaughlin College is a private school which is located at the east side of Trafalgar Road, just south of McDonald. The school offers enrollment opportunities from JK to grade 12. The school has been in operation since the 1970s. The existing building was constructed in 1856 and has been used for a number of different uses over the years, including a private residence, a nursing home, and apartments. The school was originally designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act in the 1980s.
Mr. Hecht, 1 second, please. Oh, here we go. Council was missing its display, and it's just arrived, so please carry on. It was guaranteed that as soon as I stopped you, the problem would solve itself.
Okay. The school was originally designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act in the 1980s, and all the lands which are subject to the zoning amendment application are located within the Trafalgar Road Heritage District. The owners have submitted a zoning amendment application to accommodate the proposed expansion to the existing school. The owners have acquired the lands immediately adjacent to the school, located at 331 Trafalgar Road, 349 Trafalgar Road, and 272 McDonald. The application seeks to rezone these lands to permit the expansion of the boundaries of the school. The property at 331 Trafalgar Road, abutting to the south, is a two-story designated residential dwelling which is intended to be used as the headmaster's residence, with the rear yard to be used for school playground use. The property at 349 to the north is a two-story designated detached dwelling intended to be used for school offices. The existing carriage house on this property is also to be reconfigured and to be repurposed for school purposes. The property at 272 McDonald Road, this dwelling is to be removed and the property used for a new vehicular access to the school property, an exit only. This plan shows the consolidated land holdings and the proposed layout. Single driveway access from Trafalgar Road, 26 parking spaces, which are located 9 spaces here, 10 spaces in this area here, and 7 parking spaces in this area here. As part of this concept plan, there's also a 10 queuing spaces that would be provided that would be in front of the school in this location here. The proposal also includes a new 332 square meter, 3-story addition abutting to the north face of the existing 3-story school building. The rendering is shown here, and this is looking from Trafalgar Road. This would be the new addition. The elevations, this is the view from Trafalgar Road. This would be the south view, or sorry, the south view. The east view, the new addition again here, and the north view. Back to the context plan, in terms of the existing site layout versus the proposed layout, there are currently 2 vehicular accesses to the property from Trafalgar Road today. A south access, which is used for vehicular entry, and a north access for exit from the school property. The internal circulation consists of designated bus lanes, a pickup and drop-off zone, and approximately 15 individual parking spaces located in the drop-off zone in front of the school and also to the rear of the school. It should be noted as well that additional staff parking for approximately 40 vehicles are available off-site at Cornwall and Watson via a lease arrangement with the town. The proposed modifications to the site include the closure of the southerly vehicular access to Trafalgar Road, the reconfiguration of the parking and queuing areas, and the introduction of a new driveway access, exit only, onto McDonald Road. There are also modifications to the existing landscaping and the proposed removal of the existing pillars and fencing, which is along the Trafalgar Road frontage. Just in terms of the official plan, the Livable Oakville plan designates the property low-density residential. Educational facilities, including private schools, are considered community uses under the plan and are permitted within this land use designation, subject to the policies of the plan. With respect to the zoning bylaw, the existing school property is zoned CU with a site-specific provision. And the recently acquired lands are zoned RL4, which is a residential zoning. As part of the review, a zoning amendment is required as part of this development application to consolidate the land holdings. In summary, the staff report, which is before council tonight, provides an overview of the range of issues which have been identified to date and are to be considered and discussed as part of the review of the proposed zoning amendment. Although the range of issues are detailed in the report, they can generally be summarized as traffic impacts on site as well as onto the road network, neighborhood compatibility, impacts to neighborhood character, impacts to heritage preservation and adjacent properties. The meeting tonight is an opportunity to further validate or update these issues, and which will be considered as part of any further planning report. That concludes my presentation, Your Worship. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the report. Council, do you have any questions of Mr. Hecht? Oh, Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. In reading the report, there were several issues that were identified at the Oakville Heritage Committee, namely the barn or the carriage house, and the fact that the lean-to they were proposing to remove. And when we discussed at the Heritage Committee, we discussed the possibility of retaining it in its entirety, and given the amount of pedestrian access, there should have been an opportunity to have it retained. Has that been addressed as yet? Because I don't see, other than identifying it, whether or not the applicant has reconsidered that in deliberations.
Through you, Your Worship, I believe the applicant's aware of that issue, but we have not yet heard anything further on the matter.
Okay, and the other one that I wanted to capture as well was the screening from the landscaping. There was considerable discussion again at the Heritage Committee about not being as, what shall I say, a solid wall, but providing some visual access so that you can still, from a safety perspective, whether it's an iron fence or something, have the visual of the grounds and the way that the home is situated. So I just wanted to reinforce those two things.
Yes, thank you.
All right, I see no other, oh, Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to Councillor Duddick's question on heritage, you mentioned the pillars and fencing to be removed. That is currently designated under Part 4 and Part 5, so neither of those attributes are covered under the heritage.
Through you, Your Worship, the property is designated. The Heritage Committee has identified that particular matter as something for feedback or further discussion with the applicant. A permit would be required from Heritage to eventually to move forward the application, and we expect those discussions to take place.
All right. You mentioned that there's going to be a number of parking spots on site and that there are 40 spaces available off-site. Is the intent to continue using those or to contain everything on the property?
Through you, Your Worship, from what I understand, the applicant is intending to retain that lease arrangement, but it would be part of the future report coming forward to council.
All right, and you mentioned that there are a number of items that have been identified that'll come back as part of the recommendation report of them, the recommendation report. One of them being the provincial policy statement, and on page 15, the subject lands are located within a settlement area, which are areas to be the focus of growth and development. With recent announcements from Queen's Park, does that affect this at all, or is this just business as usual in terms of going through it?
Through you, Your Worship, it's business as usual as it stands today, but we're monitoring the provincial announcements as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Lischenna.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Heck, I'm blanking out. Is there a traffic light at McDonald in Trafalgar? There is not. So is this looking also into the change in traffic patterns with respect to the new entrance at McDonald?
Through you, Your Worship.
And how is that addressed?
The traffic study will be addressing those matters as well. From my read of the draft of the traffic study, there's no plan today as part of that proposal to incorporate that, but the study is still under review.
Councillor Hazlett-Thiel.
Through you, Your Worship. I have a few questions that I just want to verify will be in the report when it comes back. So further to Councillor Lischenna's comments about traffic, will there be a peer review or how will the assessment of the traffic report be reported back to us?
Through you, Your Worship, we'll be getting some feedback from our engineering construction department on that, whether they're in agreement with the traffic study and whether there's any revisions required to that as well, and how that will impact the proposal, whether it's the layout or on-site operations or traffic onto the road network.
Okay, thank you. I have some further questions. In the report, you talk about and identify clearly the importance of the official plan and 2.2.1. Is it safe for me to assume that you'll speak to that specific section around preserve, enhance, and protect the distinct character in the final report and your recommendation?
Through you, your worship, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then just for confirmation as well, there's a section around in determining the location for new community uses. There's several critical factors in there, including whether or not it's intended to support and serve the community or is more appropriately suited to an institutional designation. Will that be addressed specifically in your report?
Through you, your worship, yes, it will be.
Okay. That's all I have right now.
That's fine. If there are no other questions from councillors, let's turn to the public. Madam Clerk, would you call the listed delegations? And after any listed delegations, we will poll the audience to see if anybody else has an issue to lodge with staff for the eventual recommendation report.
Our first listed delegation is David Wild.
Welcome, Mr. Wild. The council looks forward to your information and concerns, and planning staff will attempt to capture them. And at the end of the meeting on this item, a resolution will be adopted listing the issues that have been heard and registered by staff.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Can everybody hear me? Thank you all.
In fact, if you stand up perfectly comfortably, the people working the magical devices in the back will make sure that we can all hear you.
Perfect. Well, Mayor, council, staff, neighbors, thank you so much for the time and the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I have to admit, coming through on a personal note, it was nice to see that the sign outside this building's door still said Town of Oakville as opposed to Town of Halton. So one community uprising at a time, I assume. I'm here, my name is David Wild. I live on 283 McDonald Road. I'm here to voice my opposition to the expansion of McLaughlin College. I have 3 reasons for that. I'd like to enumerate them and then just take a moment or two briefly to go through the rationale on each of them. The first is that the plan diminishes, if I can use the term loosely, the livability of my neighborhood, my neighbor's neighborhood, and this is in direct contrast to the strategy and the vision of the town. I'll speak to that momentarily. It also physically shrinks and depopulates a heritage district that the town has, for several generations, fought for through the offices of the former Mayor Barrett, as well as the vision of several generations of council, and I'm hoping this council too. And third of all, the benefits that are associated with this proposed expansion accrue strictly to the business of McLaughlin College, and it does not come through to the town or by extension the neighborhood. So if I could speak to the livability just for a moment, I think some of the councillors have spoken about traffic. My issue is more at a higher level. I'm suggesting that air, noise, and light pollution associated with this expansion is going to negatively influence the entire neighborhood. Right now, we do have gridlock around McLaughlin College at various times of the day. With an expansion, depending on which numbers we hear, there would be about a 1/4 to 1/3 increase in the number of students, and one assumes that there would be that much more traffic. Additionally, the new community center is scheduled to open. By the way, thank you very, very much for that. It's not my choice of architecture, but what can one do? I'll deal with that later. But in terms of what we have then is pretty much gridlock. Once we do have the community center open, we don't have a bus route down Reynolds anymore. I'm hoping that gets resolved, but that issue leads directly to what can only be described as a group of angry bees circling around looking for non-existent parking, which would be the traffic in this case. Reynolds to Trafalgar on McDonald Road is, according to Google Maps, 160 meters long, 0.1 miles. So given the fact that the entrance, or excuse me, the exit from McLaughlin, the proposed exit, if you split it halfway, it's 80 meters on either side. I figure it's probably enough room for 15 cars going west, 15 cars going east. There's a stop sign currently at Trafalgar Road, and there's a stop light at, a very slow stoplight at Reynolds and McDonald. And I don't see how this expansion will do anything but clog up this area for all of us. In terms of the air, noise, and light pollution, as I say, the activities of the college are fantastic for the students, the clients of the business. There's opening ceremonies, convocation, barbecues, music nights, plays. It's everything that one would want in a school, which is terrific. That level of activity also extends to the weekends when there are open houses and various activities as well. Now, we're anticipating, of course, in my neighborhood, that a 1/3 increase in students would lead to a 1/3 increase in all of these activities. So all of this is compounded on top of what we already see. Light-wise, it's a very large, McLaughlin College is a very large white building. And when you put an extra layer on top of that and you light it up for security and you have cleaners going through, it's going to tend to glow in the dark. And when you cut down all the mature trees around it in order to perform this potential expansion, you're going to see a lot of this building and you're going to see a lot of the light. The council, in their wisdom, and I agree with it, has spent an awful lot of money on LED lights, and they work very, very well. Strangely so, I have to admit, but they do work, and this is counterproductive to that. So from my perspective, this expansion does not deliver on the promise of livability that this council has put forward as one of the strategies. Second of all, on a more personal note, we're talking about decreasing the population within the town in a specific area. The Heritage District itself was hard fought for. Unfortunately, I had to read former Mayor Barrett's obituary as he passed away recently, or within the last several months, and you could tell that this was not an easy win for a politician. He seemed to be swimming upstream most of the time. And we're talking about, while keeping the houses, taking away the people from the houses. And I don't understand how that could be a vision that anyone should support. We are physically shrinking, something that was fought for, and we're removing families. We're absolutely decreasing the population that's around the school. The school itself has a population during the daytime, and by extension, as I said, in these evening activities, but it's not the same as having neighbors around you. I don't believe that this is what we as a town fought for in order to get the Heritage District. I believe that these benefits are one way only. McLaughlin College is a for-profit institution. That is their choice, and I have no problem with their business model. Appleby is a nonprofit institution. They're a little bit less opaque. We can see this type of situation occurring within Oakville right now with Glen Abbey. We see that there is an owner of real estate that is looking to generate return for their owners. And I appreciate that. But that does not have to be at the expense of the town or my neighborhood. So functionally, what I see is that we will be providing this business an opportunity to increase their revenue without any benefit whatsoever to the town. So in summary, if I could, I believe that this approach is contrary to the vision and the strategy of the town, both short-term and long-term. I believe that this is a hollowing out of my neighborhood, and it's also a consumption of a non-renewable resource, because once you get rid of a heritage district, as we know, there is no going back. They're just facades if you want to rebuild it. And finally, the benefit, as far as I can see, is only to the business and not to the town or my neighborhood. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Wild, for your information. Councillor Adams has a question for you.
Sir.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very complete, but you had one section that you spoke very briefly about, which was the light issue. Can you?
Sorry, the light?
The lighting issue?
Yes.
Can you describe that in more detail? And,
Absolutely.
And whether it's associated, especially with, I'll call it the pillar on the north side, or if there's more to it than just that?
Well, from my perspective, you're adding an extra layer on top of the existing structure. And that has to be lit. There has to be security lighting, there has to be lighting around the area, there will be lighting inside the new proposed classrooms. All that is going to be reflected off the white buildings. Everything's white from what I can tell. Once you cut down all those trees, there's going to be a glow that will come from that building. Right now, it's bright, but it will be brighter. And my feeling is that I don't need to see any more brightness in the sky looking south.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wild, for
Thank
your
you.
information. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
Next delegation is Tom Dugard.
Welcome, Mr. Dugard. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. How do I get my presentation up here? Oh, sorry. I thought they forgot me.
It's about to happen.
Pardon?
He's working on it.
Yeah.
Which one is yours, sir?
Yeah, that one, perfect. Double, oh, there we go. How do I change the slides? Just up?
And yeah, you can just go
Okay,
down. So
great, thank you.
it's going to be down, okay?
Pardon?
So it's down.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, town staff, and members of the community. My name is Tom Dugard. I've lived at 323 Trafalgar Road for 40-plus years now. And I'd like to let you know that I oppose this application. In 1979, McLaughlin purchases Kerosene Castle. And LACAC, or the, bear with me, Local Architectural Conservative Advisory Committee, recommends the tower and the north wing be designated architectural and historical significance under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Bylaw 1980.69 designates the property in total as property of historic and architectural value and interest. Since 1980, there have been 5 additions of various sizes approved by the Committees of Adjustment. These additions have consumed and hidden parts of the historic portion of the house and make it difficult to differentiate the original building from the later additions. In 1996, Council passed the town-initiated site-specific bylaw 1996-121, quote, to impose further controls on any future expansion of the school facility. This bylaw established the maximum gross floor area to be 2,986 square meters. The existing school has a gross floor area of 3,073. This is the result of minor variances approved by the Committees of Adjustment after the bylaw was approved. This application seeks to add an additional 1,000 square meters of gross floor area for a total of 4,059, an increase of 32.1%. The current zoning, CU SP 283, allows 3,073 square meters. These numbers are under review. In 2010, there was a change in the method of calculating floor area, which will reduce all of these numbers. This application proposes a 3-story addition topped with a glass bowl, housing a boardroom and an office, which, when the lights are on, will be like a beacon shining into the abutting homes on Reynolds and McDonald. The proposed addition is too tall and too bulky. It will completely overpower the original Part 4 heritage building and tower, since some of the tower has already been absorbed by previous additions. The proposed addition is slightly lower than the tower and the allowed height of 11.5 meters. However, because of its bulk and the glass bowl, it appears taller and will draw your eye to it and away from the heritage tower. In 1996, the school stated 300 students is the optimal teaching environment. However, enrollment is now 350, as per the school's website, going to 450, a 28.6% increase. But 450 may not be the final enrollment, since page 5 of the traffic impact study states over 450 students. This increase in enrollment will increase the number of cars entering the site daily from 240 to 332. That's in the traffic study figures 4 and 13, a 38% increase, which Trafalgar Road cannot handle during the AM and PM peak hours. Not only will traffic increase on Trafalgar, but this proposal will increase traffic on McDonald by 160 cars per day, figure 13. This rezoning application would see the removal of 3 viable, affordable homes to be replaced with a driveway at 272 McDonald, school offices and classrooms at 349 Trafalgar, and the headmaster's house at 331 Trafalgar. The applicant says this is in keeping with the Oakville official plan, the Halton Region plan, the provincial policy statement, and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, objective of intensification. However, these documents are looking for intensification of residential units, not private schools. This application proposes the exact opposite to what is occurring in our neighborhood. The Medical Arts Building at McDonald and Reynolds is rezoning to residential, and the hospital lands are rezoning to community use and residential. The applicant tries to use the intensification objectives in the OP, etc., to justify expanding a for-profit business instead of residential units. The expansion of this commercial enterprise is not in keeping with our stable residential neighborhood in the Heritage District. We are concerned that allowing a commercial venture to increase its footprint and visibility in a stable residential heritage district and the gateway to our attractive downtown will encourage other businesses to assume Oakville is open to allowing our gateway to become a mixed commercial residential street similar to Hurontario Street south of QEW in Mississauga. This would not support the town's objective to be the most livable town in Canada and would destroy the attractive and enviable entrance to our town. Why is there a need to rezone 331 Trafalgar? The school has stated numerous times that this heritage building will remain a residence for the headmaster/founder with no school activities conducted therein. If 331 is rezoned, this would allow the school to expand south into the rear yard of 331 with no community input, only a building permit. The school advertises JK to grade 12. However, their floor plans do not show classrooms for grades 10, 11, and 12. Is there already another expansion plan? The existing property traffic configuration can accommodate approximately 50 cars in the PM peak hour. How many cars can be accommodated on the proposed site? If the same or less than the existing, then the proposed Trafalgar traffic congestion will be worse than presented in the traffic study. There is no capacity analysis summary for existing conditions for the south driveway AM and PM peak hours and north driveway AM and PM peak hours. However, Synchro 9 reports are available and included in the TIS. Table 6, there is no overall capacity analysis for future Trafalgar Road and school access, although the Synchro 9 report is included in the TIS. Could it be because the overall level of service is D, or long traffic delays for the AM peak hour, and E, very long traffic delays for the PM peak hour? The numbers on the SP1 and the floor plans A2 through A6 distributed at the January meeting appear not to be consistent with town documents. For example, CAV A1722007 states a total floor area of 3,073 square meters. SP1 shows floor area of 1,713 square meters. This discrepancy is the result of a change in floor area calculation in 2010. These two numbers are not comparable. Apparently, there will be a reduction of asphalt and increase in lawn area. This is not evident on the site plan. They propose to remove virtually all the grass at 272 McDonald, most of the grass behind 349 Trafalgar, and a good portion of the grass in front of 331. All this grass is to be replaced by asphalt and various types of hard surfaces. And finally, on page 39, the applicant states, this application would be beneficial for the neighborhood. Oops, sorry. There are no benefits for the neighborhood, only for the school. Our benefits will be more traffic congestion, more noise, more light pollution, and the elimination of 3 viable, affordable homes in our stable residential heritage neighborhood. Some benefits. Thank you for listening to our concerns. We know you will consider what you have heard tonight from the neighbors of McLaughlin College and our 58-name petition opposing the application when making your decision regarding this rezoning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dugard, for your information, and I'm confident that staff will capture the planning issues that you named. Councillor, do you have questions for, Councillor Giddings has questions for you, sir.
First of all, briefly, this evening is the public meeting, and just for the benefit of everybody here, there's no decision being made this evening. We're getting items of concern out on the table, and staff will be coming back in a later date. I understand you had a partner this evening that wasn't able to make it. Was there anything that you wanted to add briefly on his behalf?
He's floating around somewhere on the Indian Ocean at the moment.
Don't say
And,
that.
It's not a bad
But he's
place.
alive, right?
That's pretty harsh.
he's not on a raft.
You need to get to a certain slide.
No, the next presentation isn't there. If it was mine, I would know what to do.
It's Tom.
Yes. Great. Thanks very much. Okay, so David had put together a presentation, then realized he's going to be, like I said, floating around the Indian Ocean. The Trafalgar Heritage District is the gateway to Old Oakville and our downtown. Could Trafalgar Road become Oakville's Hurontario Street with an increased commercial presence? McLaughlin expansion proposes to hollow out the neighborhood, turns bedrooms into classrooms. In this particular home, the one at 349 Trafalgar, there will be 3 offices and 5 classrooms. The student increase from 300 to 450. These numbers are from the traffic study, figure 3, page 6. And the traffic will increase by greater than 50%. Trafalgar is already a bottleneck, as you can see by this picture. New downtown condos mean more commuters to and from the GO Transit and the QEW. McLaughlin drop-off and pickup times are bumper to bumper. You'll notice in this photograph that behind the school bus, those cars are backed up almost to Cornwall. GHD completed the traffic impact study. And the impact study said vehicle delays are expected to remain acceptable despite the minor increase of vehicles. Well, I guess we really don't think it's acceptable today when you look at that kind of picture. And this is not unusual. This is virtually every day. The reality is the projected increase in vehicles is not minor and triggers a drop in level of service. These are just the levels of service defined in the Highway Capacity Manual. D is long traffic delays, and E is very long traffic delays. F, there is an F, but it's not polite. GHD projected drop in level of service on Trafalgar from B to D in the morning and C to E, very long delays in the afternoon. McDonald goes from A, which is good, to long delays in the afternoon and the morning. GHD recommends a new traffic circulation plan. And this is a great picture because it shows where the 4 buses, I think you can see them, I don't need to use this, I guess. Well, it doesn't work anyway. Anyway, you see the 4 buses up there? What they're doing is actually blocking 2 of the turnaround pickup lanes in the front of the school. What this picture doesn't really show is that up the side, the south side, you can actually get 10 plus cars going up there in the afternoon and 15 cars at the back of the building sitting, waiting for the children. So what you're looking at is removing the space for like 30 cars. So currently, we have 1 exit and 1 entrance. The entrance is on the south, where 238 vehicles go in, and on the north, 238 vehicles come out. This is per day. They're going to remove the driveway, the south driveway, remove the pickup zone. No, it's no good. Remove the pickup zone in the back of the school. Then you're going to have a 2-way on the north side where half of the vehicles will be coming out and the other half will be coming out on McDonald. Hopefully. Hold on to your hats. At this point, 332 cars are going to be coming in and out at the 1 entrance. 332 cars in. Why is it flashing? Because I touched it? Yes. Oh. 332 cars in, 171 cars out every day. That's 503 cars. That's a 111% increase over the 238 cars we saw before. And you'll have the 160 cars going out onto McDonald. And these are conservative estimates. This is a problem that the residents face on Trafalgar. With the old entrance, they were able to have 6 cars southbound stacked up before they could turn into the school. Now, you're going to have those 6 cars backed up from the north side, or the north entrance, and you're going to be blocking for between 60 and 90 minutes a day, 3 to 5 driveways along Trafalgar on the the west side of Trafalgar. The Livable Oakville plan says that impacts on the adjacent property shall be minimized in relation to grading, drainage, location of service areas, access, and circulation. The transportation system should adequately accommodate anticipated traffic volumes. Well, the new entry exit plan increases vehicular movement by at least the 111%, that's to 238 to 503 at the Trafalgar driveway. Adjacent driveways will be totally blocked by queuing vehicles turning into the campus. So it doesn't really meet that access and circulation requirement in the plan. The increase in students from 300 to 450. GHD projects traffic congestion will get worse with the level of D or E, and McDonald falls from A to D. Therefore, the transportation system should adequately accommodate anticipated volumes is not really being lived up to. Just some pictures to give you a better idea what's going on. A couple of years ago, when the traffic was backed up, either going south or north, people would wait, honk their horn, and wait for people to move out of the way. Today, they don't. You'll notice here, there's a white car beside the black car where the arrow is. That car is heading south in the northbound lane, which is not an uncommon situation. This one is clearer. You see the guy going south in the northbound lane. Here we have a guy going north in the southbound lane. And if you notice that red car there, he's going south. And those two, fortunately, didn't have an accident, but that's what we're all worried about. And the illegal left turn, the school has got a sign on the post that says no left turn, but some of the people can't read very well. This guy, I mean, we don't see this too often, but we do see it. Guy making a U-turn right in the middle of the block, regardless of everybody else, doesn't care. And since I don't have enough time, okay? We know McLaughlin is a school, but this one generates more traffic than the street system can handle. Initial GHD traffic study commissioned by McLaughlin does not meet the criteria of livable Oakville. It also did not take into account the traffic on Reynolds and Lawson. Lawson is the preferred return route for the shuttle bus, which makes 7 or 8 trips each morning and each afternoon. Before this project is allowed to proceed, the traffic issues have to be identified in the study. Must be addressed, hopefully after consultation with the TCRA and heritage neighbors. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir, for both presentations.
Thank you.
Are there questions? Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Mr. Dugard. Thank you so much for showing us those photos. I actually had questions about that before those slides came up. So currently, you live across the street from the college?
No, I live
South of it?
second house south.
Okay.
So
And
if you approve this application, first house south.
first time. So what is your situation currently if you wanted to get out of your driveway? Is it also 60 to 90? Or you don't do that?
I don't
You
go
avoid
out
it?
around 8 o'clock, 8:30 or 3 o'clock.
So the 60 to 90 minutes in that slide, I know you're speaking for the other person
Yes.
who's in the Indian Ocean right now, but does it take about an hour for people to try to get out of their driveway currently?
No, what happens is the traffic is backed up for that amount of time.
Okay,
You
so,
They start
the-
arriving at 3, they
And
don't
the-
leave till the last kid is out at
okay.
3:30.
Now, I'm not sure if you'd be able to answer this question, perhaps staff would. Do you know the percentage of students that currently go to the school via bus?
In the traffic study, the school has assumed 20%.
Okay. And I apologize, I haven't looked at all the details there, but was there a mitigation strategy of increasing that to be bused rather than to get rid of the?
There was nothing mentioned in the traffic study
Okay.
about that.
Perhaps I can ask staff later. Thank you.
Councillor Adams?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I assume that you've read the report that's before us right now,
The staff report?
the staff
Yes.
report. And you've seen the issues that are under review and the matters to be considered.
Yes.
Are there any issues that you've brought forward that you feel are not adequately covered in that list already prepared by our staff?
Well, as I understood that report, it is only to tell you what is going to be considered for the final report to you folks in May. Is that not?
It is the list of issues to be considered as part of their review process. So the question that I have for you is, are there issues that you have that you think ought to be considered that are not already in the list of issues to be considered?
Well, there are some in what I've presented tonight, and I know that they're going to be listening and making note about those ones in addition to what they've, I believe that's the way it
Yes, that
works.
is the case. They ought to be doing that, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I don't
Thank you,
think I'm
Councillor.
answering your
Thank you, sir.
question.
Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Am I answering your question okay?
Yes, I think you've adequately
Thank you.
responded.
Thank you, Mr. Dugard, for
Thank
your information and your neighbors.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
Next delegation is Mark Boot from the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association.
Mr. Boot, welcome. Council looks forward to the information from you and TCRA.
Thank you.
Yes, just give it a second, they're gonna route it.
How do you advance the slides?
Yes,
This way?
so when I have it up, you can just press down and that's your next
If I
slide.
want to point to something on the screen.
They won't see it now, but they can see what we're seeing here, because they have screens over there as well, so you'll just have to remark it in a sense. Just be like that. So,
Okay.
sir. It's a mark. And once again, just sit down for your next slide, okay?
Down to the next?
Correct. That's your next slide.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mayor Burton, the chair, members of council, staff, and a serious number of assembled guests. My name is Mark Boot. I'm representing the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association as a director on the board. In this presentation, Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association does not support this application based on the negative impact of the growth on Trafalgar Road, the 3rd Heritage District, and the prime residential area. Some of these slides you may have seen from Mr. Heck's presentation. The current situation, lovely forested area of our town. The college is expanding its footprint by 66%. There's a zoning request for 3 residential properties, again, as you have heard, prime residential and heritage area, and it plans to increase their student base by 50%. This slide you've seen already. For those of you who aren't familiar with the area, it gives you a sense of where the school actually is in the area. This slide, I think, is useful from the perspective, while you've already seen it to some degree, it's a clearer indication of the impact of the expanding property, which is in yellow, which is 1.2 acres, and if this was approved, the 2 acres that they're going to have will be the yellow and the blue. You can see from the 2 areas bounding it from the south and the north, Lawson to McDonald, that's a significant hollowing out of a prime residential area for which we have considerable angst. The interesting thing that you might note here is Lawson Street. It was historically more of a laneway. Lawson is not regulation width as a road, as you could probably see, nor does it have sidewalks. What we would note is that both Lawson and Reynolds were both omitted from the traffic study, which both those streets are a significant part of the circulation for the school buses and parents delivering and picking up kids from their school. I will say that I live on Lawson Street. You do not want to have you bending out too far into the street when the buses and parents are trying to drop off kids because they are moving. The Lawson and Reynolds streets bear significant increased traffic related to McLaughlin College operations. with increased school population increasing by 50%, with the majority of the students coming from away, meaning the catchment area for the school is is Oakville, but it's also Burlington, Brampton, Mississauga, and beyond. So it's a significant draw of geography that they come from. So the serious traffic and safety concerns have already been stated, so I won't belabor that point at this point. So the community concerns, you've heard some of them already. This is a private school that I suggest to you is operating beyond its capacity, and as has been already said, it's a business for profit school compared to some of its peers. Expanding the school population creates overcapacity and issues of safety and traffic on and off the property, negatively impacting the neighborhood. Will this residential neighborhood continue to be hollowed out by the private sale of properties? The integrity of the heritage designation is in question when, as has been pointed out, you're going to have two properties taken out of the residential pool and their purpose significantly changed and altered. The footprint of the school is significantly undersized for the number of students, a point I hope to bring to your attention here. When we have talked about the enrollment of the school, in the length of time it's been there, you can see from this graph that it has shot up to, at a point in time not very long ago, when it was 370, 380 students. It's fallen back to 300. I'm not sure why that is. And now you are going to see on that graph a level of students north of the part that's represented on the graph. So what's interesting is the optimal number of students in early days was identified by the founder as 250 students. Later on, that number was expanded to 300 students. The enrollment now is 300, but with various McLaughlin applications and presentations, we're not certain, but there's going to be a student population of 450 plus students. I would hark back to the founder's actual comments that we have on record with the town staff, and that is that 250 to 300 students was deemed to be the optimum number to avoid an impact on the learning and working environment. This is a slide which provides a few metrics. Apologize if it's a bit confusing to you, to represent what the capacity is or the carrying capacity of the school. In the top line, you'll see the list of a peer group of private schools in Oakville, probably that you're familiar with. The second line, which is set of numbers, represents from their respective websites the number of students in the population that they have or hope to carry or typically would have on board. So that's the number of students. The following line is the property size in acres. So you can see, for instance, that currently our friends at McLaughlin have 1.2 acres. They're the smallest by any stretch of the imagination from any of its peer groups. If you looked at population size, take Fern Hill as an example, at 400, maybe the closest number relative to McLaughlin, it's sitting on 10 acres. The last slide is what I've done is taken, and this is a carrying capacity issue, I've divided the number of students into the total square feet represented by their property. And so currently they have 174 square feet per student, or with the expanded application, it'll be 194. So high density and no room to grow, carrying capacity I think is an issue. With 300 students, McLaughlin has the lowest square footage at 174 square feet per student on 1.2 acres. If the zoning is approved, 450 students will be on 2 acres. The space only increases to 194 square feet per student. The peer group for the Oakville group of private schools is 895 square feet per student. Perhaps to be fair, if I was to withdraw the Appleby College at 48 acres, the average again is still 666 square feet. So again, McLaughlin is completely undersized for the purpose for which it says that it is designed. To get up to the standard that is equal to the peer group, McLaughlin would need to acquire 10 to 20 residential properties to achieve that peer standard. I'm not sure that's what we all want to have in mind. Community concerns, traffic and safety, a serious concern. Original zoning permitted 250 students with 60 walking to school. Today, 20% are bused and the majority come by car. The traffic study conducted is unreliable, incomplete, and does not follow the town guidelines. Traffic, as you have seen, and safety is a serious concern. Quiet enjoyment is up for grabs. The neighborhood impact, McLaughlin School growth has increased dramatically over 40 years. The new site, the existing site is too small. 58 local residents opposed through a petition, the application, and the TCRA board unanimously opposes it. Concerns are not the least of which have already been stated. It's a hollowing out of a prime neighborhood and residential area. Property values are negatively affected. Traffic and congestion and safety are an issue. In McLaughlin's history with the neighborhood, they tend to grow and then get permission afterwards. Course of actions, expand elsewhere. Rutherglen Glen is a good example of a private school that acquired a second campus to expand. The neighborhood revitalization of existing school building is maybe an option. The old Brantwood School is heritage, was a school for 90 years. The current building footprint accommodates several hundred students with additional green space. In addition, it's adjacent to a park, is not on a major street, and could be a possible location. Oakville Trafalgar High School is a heritage building. Is that a possibility? The other thing is to build new and go elsewhere. In summary, the rezoning application should be denied in our view. This is a business for profit, leaving only negative consequences for the neighborhood. McLaughlin should look at school locations that better suit their students, their neighbors, and the community. We can all make strides to meet the town of Oakville's vision to continue to be Canada's best place to live. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your information, Mr. Boot. Questions? Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is John Valley.
Mr. Valley, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Council looks forward to your information.
I'll be brief. A lot of points have been made this evening. First of all, thank you for receiving these representations. And second, particular thanks to Councillor Haslett-Teal. She was very quick to respond to my initial call, and that was greatly appreciated. My wife and I are relatively new residents to this part of Oakville, to the Heritage District. We bought there, having lived in the town for 37 years, we bought there because of the character of downtown Oakville, of old Oakville. We recently completed an addition and renovation to our home at 230 Reynolds. The discussions with the Heritage Committee were extensive and frankly interesting, and ultimately resulted in a very good outcome, I think, for both. Those discussions, while they focused on design and construction standards and materials, they were also based on an underlying principle. And that came through very strongly. That was the question of respect for and maintenance of the standards, the character, and the nature of the heritage area. And I think, frankly, the issue before council relative to zoning represents a conflict with maintaining that character. Second dimension, a material expansion, and look, by the way, there will no doubt be building standards applied to the McLaughlin expansion. Although, Mayor Dudek, I would love to have come up with a cubist design somewhat similar to what's being proposed for the north, just to see how the Heritage Committee would have reacted. But a material expansion of a commercial enterprise is not consistent with, nor does it respect the standards, the character, and the nature of a heritage area. So I think, again, that is a fundamental that needs to be respected. Third point, there are other coincident developments that are going to go ahead. I was somewhat surprised to hear in Mr. Boot's presentation that Reynolds and Lawson were not included in the traffic study. As a resident of Reynolds Street, frankly, I'm already concerned about other coincident developments that are going to take place, whether that's townhouses and some medium-density housing developments or the community center. I think the combined effect of those two sets of developments, community center and other residential expansions, along with this, clearly need to be taken into account. One last point, and I think it's a question of consistency. And this should not be taken as a criticism or a position for or against the current debate around Glen Abbey. But I think it's inconsistent, disingenuous to declare a 40-year-old golf course a heritage site while allowing the expansion of a commercial endeavor in the middle of a heritage district. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your information. Are there questions for the gentleman? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Michael Barton, President of MB1 Development Consulting.
Mr. Barton, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I am not Mr. Barton.
You do not appear to be Mr. Barton.
I am not Mr. Barton, but Mr. Barton is standing right beside me. I'm Denise Baker, and I'm here in two capacities. One, I am counsel for McLaughlin College, and two, I am a member of the TCRA and do live in the neighborhood here. We have a presentation for you. I'm not sure. So it'll come up and Mr. Barton will take over. But I just wanted to provide a little bit of context for you with respect to this application. So one of the presenters asked the question, why? Why are we doing this? And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of context that the goal of this project is to upgrade the current facilities at the McLaughlin School for the current students, to include labs, makerspace equipment, provide opportunities for the existing students to integrate new learnings and skills that complement core academics, ultimately to enhance their learning environment. And I want to draw a few comparisons. Most of the people in this audience speaking to this project, I imagine, live in the southeast Oakville area. And I would submit to you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, that there's nothing particularly unique about the relationship between this school and its neighbors that doesn't exist at E.J. James, St. Vincent's, Limbrook, St. Mildred's, all the other schools that many of us in this community send our children to. There's neighbors on either side, there's traffic, there's parking lots, there's interface relationships between the schools and the neighbors. There's nothing unique about that. And in the case of Brantwood, in fact, there was also a heritage district. And so I'd ask you to keep that in mind as we are keeping in mind the concerns of the neighborhood. And I will say we have met with the neighborhood on multiple occasions, including with the TCRA as recently as 2 days ago. And so we want to say that in an effort to be a good neighbor, we're here listening. We have our planner here. We have someone from our architect's office here, Mr. Martino, Mr. Barton. We have Mr. Maria here to answer any questions about traffic. But I would say, through you, sir, to Councillor Duddick, a question about the heritage. I would advise, we weren't advised of the heritage meeting. We weren't in attendance at the heritage meeting. So we haven't incorporated the comments from the heritage meeting because we are actually just finding out about them. So it's all part of the evolution and the processing of the application. We continue to look forward to working with staff and the community to move this application forward.
Okay, thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak here. I'm Michael Barton. I am the planner on file. I will go through this as quickly as possible to allow questions. We do have a couple of views here. This is just a view of the school at the front, so the questions about the fence and the pillars, you can see that there. It does show the circulating area. It does provide a pretty good elevation of how it looks from Trafalgar today. In terms of the application, so the application before you is to amend the zoning bylaw to change the designation on the additional lands. So those are the lands that have been recently acquired from low-density residential RL4-0 to community use. So that is the application before staff right now. This will be followed by a site plan approval process that will look at all details, ensuring no light pollution issues, how the building will ultimately look. Through the zoning, we will be looking at elevations, the general intent, the look of that, but we do have the opportunity, as well as through this zoning review, to address the issues that you're hearing about. We've seen this, the community context. Again, we've seen the same map. You can see the circulating area in front. A note about the traffic. So we have been monitoring the traffic recently. There have been some changes I'll go into, but in the last month, since February 8th to March 8th, there have only been 4 occasions noted on video. So the school does have surveillance of the front of the school and the road, where there was significant delay along the front. The the traffic report actually looks at no delays longer than 5 minutes, which occur during the AM and PM peak period. So you can see in this picture there is no traffic chaos at this point. So this is a time where pickup or drop off is starting to occur. So it is a very limited window. This is the proposed site plan. So again, closing the driveways, it does a couple of functions. It consolidates access at the one point on Trafalgar. It also addresses town policies looking to eliminating driveway cuts, so providing better sidewalk access, more landscape space along the public realm. So it really is addressing concerns. The traffic operations are more contained within the site along Trafalgar rather than having a number of individual driveways where you would have access, conflict points. We did see that illegal left turn out. That can occur at any of the 4 driveways that exist today. So bringing that down, redistributing the traffic to McDonald. I will get into traffic a bit more detail. The proposed view from Trafalgar Road, so this is where you see the fence and those pillars removed. There was a question about whether those are protected. That is not an item, although it falls in the Heritage District, an item that was considered of heritage interest to be preserved. So those are largely related to the main school building and the 2 homes that were acquired. So here you can see the extension of the sidewalk that's provided by closing the driveways, additional landscaping opportunities, reduced conflict points with pedestrians. Again, a closer view where you can see the elevation with the addition on the side. You will see pedestrian sidewalks up from Trafalgar Road directly to the school property rather than crossing over the areas where cars are circulating. So from an introductory perspective to the proposal, the subject property is the school today, 337 and 339 Trafalgar, plus the additional lands. The additional lands are 349, 331 Trafalgar, and then 272 McDonald. We have had 4 formal public consultation meetings with the communities, January 31st, 2018, August 20th, 2018, August 28th, 2018, and then January 17, 2019. There have also been 3 separate meetings with the TCRA. We've had numerous discussions with, and we've also met with town traffic engineering staff to discuss how we can address the concerns. So those are things that have happened since the application was submitted, so we can provide a little bit more detail about how traffic is being addressed. We've had many community members come forward and indicate to us that McLaughlin has been a great neighbor. And we're starting to receive letters of support. I have a couple of them with me here that I can provide. They haven't been provided. I believe the town has them. They weren't to you in time for this meeting, and I can provide those. And we are expecting more on the way. The key concerns we heard in our meetings with staff, with public, traffic, heritage preservation, compatibility, proposed floor area and student enrollment, and site landscaping and design. I'll keep this brief now as we are getting tight on time. At the main school building, there are additions and alterations to the building, as well as vehicle circulation and landscaped area changes along Trafalgar. 11,000 square foot addition, that includes the basement of the addition area. The addition will house larger, improved resource labs and areas, so you heard Denise mention that much of this area is music studio and practice room, small cafeteria, libraries and learning commons, an art studio, and then the STEAM lab. There will be no changes to 349 and 331 on the exterior. 349 will be used for school offices as well as elective classrooms. The existing carriage house is being reoriented on the property and restored to a better heritage character than its current condition. That is being maintained on the property due to input that was received. 331 is being maintained as well as a headmaster residence. And then the rear lawn will be available for school use for 85 minutes of the day, with children being out there. The intent of bringing it in is that now it's part of the school, it's functioning as part of the school, rather than being severed off as a separate independent house. 272 McDonald has been identified as not of heritage character for preservation, so even though this falls in the district, and I'll mention our heritage architect that reviewed it, but they indicated that removal of this building had no adverse impact on the character of the heritage district. Operational improvements have already been made based on input we've heard. The school is now having lights turned off at 10 p.m. That's interior and exterior, so there's motion sensor light on the exterior to ensure the only time light is on is if there is movement. There have been interior site circulation improvements and transportation demand management measures. The TDM measures are based on our discussion with traffic engineering. In terms of community uses, they are permitted in residential districts. A note, 85% of the current enrollment at the school live in Oakville wards. We have heard many families that are buying homes in Oakville with the intent of the students attending the college. Here is the map of the enrollment. All wards in Oakville are represented. The school operates 45% of the year with daytime operations only. No summer school or camps. The school is not available for rent by third parties. And events outside of the typical school operating hours are 2 Saturday open houses and 3 evening special events. Current enrollment is 340 between the kindergarten to grade 12. There are 2 classes per grade, and I hope you'll just give me a couple more minutes. This was a key issue we heard about the number of students. The historical peak enrollment was 385. The projected average future enrollment, so as you look over year, is 400. Based on the way the school operates is with 28 homerooms, the potential maximum enrollment would be 454 students. And that would be an absolute max. From a traffic perspective, our traffic study has been updated and submitted to town staff for further review based on the comments we've received. So we have been talking to them about the benefits of closing the driveways, reconfiguring the circulation area in front of the school, providing the additional exit, and it's only an exit to McDonald. And then the big one is staggering of student start and dismissal times. So if I go to the TDM measures, we've already started staggering start and dismissal times. Elementary and high school students come and leave at different times. We're looking at potential for doing off-site pickup of grades 7 to 12 students, again, just based on staff input. We've increased the number of crossing guard staff to 5. We're looking at installing movable barriers that would control traffic flow within the site, ensure that traffic can only go certain directions on site. We're looking at ride-sharing initiatives, and one of the counselors mentioned the bus usage. That's something that definitely want to increase the percentage of students using bus. And there is a video monitoring program to allow monitoring of how operations are working on the site. So with the TDM measures considered, we would expect to see a flattening of the traffic peaks, even with the additional enrollment. So the initial analysis you start seeing here is with 337 students versus 454, the peak coming down and being spread. And this is based on our current review with traffic engineering staff. So I will say the residents haven't seen this yet because we want to make sure we come forward with good information for them. And again, I'll move quickly through this, but we are definitely looking at, there are many merits here. Heritage, there will be no negative impact to heritage character. We had Alex Temporali look at this. He prepared the heritage impact assessment. He went as far as to the quote that we have there, that the proposed addition complies with the goals of the Town of Oakville's Livable Oakville Plan and the guidelines for the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District. It also complies with national and international charters on conservation. It demonstrates accepted urban design principles and does not negatively impact the heritage value of Kerosene Castle, now McLaughlin College, or the Trafalgar and McDonald Road streetscapes that are part of the Conservation District. So that is a well-respected heritage consultant that does do work for the town as well. So he's well aware of the policies here. So the conclusions here, and welcome any questions you have, but that the proposal and the zoning bylaw amendment are appropriate and conform to the policies of the Livable Oakville Plan.
Thank you for your information. You have generated a number of questions. I'm going to start at the end and come this way. Councillor Sandu.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Just a generalized question, being a parent of a young child myself, who also attends a school with many, many, many children and many students. Can you help me understand the kind of initiatives that the school has undertaken with regard to helping parents understand how traffic flows and how they would be managing their pickup and drop off? I understand that you mentioned like cones and things like that to kind of help with traffic flow. But how do you kind of prohibit other illegal behaviors, like we saw the picture of the illegal left turn?
Yeah, so certainly there's a learning curve here, and I think there'll be some things you just can't control. People passing illegally to get around any kind of traffic. I think a point with traffic is a delay is a delay. Cars stopping for 5 seconds are a delay, but I think that's a normal thing we would expect to see anywhere you drive, especially in the peak periods. So there's that learning curve. Again, we have the school is monitoring traffic operations in front. They're increasing the number of crossing guards. So the intent is that illegal maneuvers wouldn't be allowed. You'd be having them moving along. And then with pulling these temporary barriers across, you actually can restrict the movements. So by having the exit to McDonald as well, you're going to reduce the number of, you're not going to have everyone trying to exit to onto Trafalgar. And then interior to the site is where most of the circulation is going to happen. So you're going to see, as people are coming out, they're going to have to wait their turn to get out. They're not going to have multiple opportunities to be coming out, 4 driveways that exist today. So there will be that learning curve. They are encouraging increase in bus use. They have programs for that. So now we are, and as I mentioned, we are discussing with the town how we could encourage increased bus usage. So we're working for that. Again, we're looking at traffic engineering staff to be happy with how we're looking to address it, so we're doing that as well. So I think through this process, the parents are already being educated about what are the concerns, what we're hearing today. And that's why I mentioned, based on what they've done already with the change in dismissal time, they've seen a huge impact over the course of February 8th to March 8th and the amount of queuing on the street that they're seeing. I think they were actually quite surprised when we looked at the video to see the dramatic change along the front of the school.
Are you using a staggered dismissal? Is that what's
Yes.
changing? Okay. And help me understand a little bit more about, you were talking about the crossing guards and things like that. Is the expectation that children will be walking to school instead of parents
No, I
driving
mean
them?
interior to the site. So you're going to have controls in front of the school. You're going to have controls at the entry to the, and that's also and that's why I mentioned the conflicts on the sidewalks. So by only having one driveway, it's easier to control what's going on there for safety of pedestrian movement as well. So it makes it an more easily controlled environment as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you for your presentation. There were some concerns raised by previous delegates about the lights, and you touched briefly on it. I just wanted you to expand. You mentioned that the lights turn off inside the school at 10 p.m. So what about the exterior lights and all of the lights on the property? And with this proposed development, what would be the future plan for the lights?
Okay. So yes, so we actually heard the site lighting concerns by a neighbor at one of our meetings. So based on that, the owners went and looked at what was going on and realized there was no real, standard for when the lights went off. So they quickly changed that so that 10 p.m. lights go down. And then exterior, there is some motion generated lights where if someone was walking out there in the rear yard, they would come on. But after 10 p.m., you wouldn't expect anyone to be walking in the rear yard of the school anyways. Again, interior, all lights off. And we heard that concern about that light pollution. So I would expect town staff to be looking at ensuring no light trespass from the property anyways as part of the evaluation. But I think the owners I think they were not really aware of how much impact that had to the neighbors that were right behind, and so they've gone and addressed that. So going forward, as you mentioned, there would be definitely a controlled plan on the way the lighting would work.
Great, thank you for your presentation.
Councillor Chinna.
Mr. Barton, you indicated that 85% of students are from Oakville. So the bus policy of distance is at 1.5 kilometers before you're able to get the bus for a child who's going to the school?
I believe that's just for public system. Again, in this case, anyone who wants to participate in the bus program has it available. I just think the enrollment is not as high as they would like it to be at this point.
Okay.
So it is a decision to opt in and say they want to be part
So
of the busing.
current walk to school, is there a percentage of those students? Because generally, walk to school means mom or dad drives you.
Yes.
So, That's what I found.
We could provide that, because that map I provided was based on a postal code analysis, so we could, if I just go back there,
Well,
look at, what does that mean? sort
It
of
seems to me that the bus policy needs to be really looked at
Mm-hmm.
closely, because that could be a mitigating factor for the amount of cars in the area.
It's definitely, and as I mentioned, I think the traffic in this case has been reviewed more than almost any other project I've looked at or I've been involved in before the application. So there was a lot of look at it, how could we deal with it? The application was in, that's when we were then meeting with traffic engineering staff about these items. So they mentioned, well, what about TDM? What can we do? So that's ongoing right now.
Are parents asked to pay extra to for their kids to take the bus? Could that be another concern cost-wise?
And thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe now they are, but it's certainly something that we would continue to explore with the school owners in terms of a TDM measure that we're working on with staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Adams?
Thank you very much. I think I heard you say 450 students in 28 classes. Is that correct?
28 homerooms.
28
homerooms,
Okay. So that works out to about 16 students a class, and I've just heard the province say that they think 28 per class at high school is great. What's to stop you from going to 28 per class and getting 784 students?
If you want to answer, sure.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Adams. It's one of the fundamental distinctions between the public system and the private system. So the system that the government is talking about is for the public school system, where historically and traditionally the schools are, the classes, are much larger. So from an operational perspective, if this is to be marketed to those who want to pay to go to school, the larger classrooms are not particularly viable. And I say that as a parent with children in both the public and the private school system. So in this instance, it's not a big selling point for the operators to have large classrooms in a private school setting.
Very good. I appreciate that 28 is unlikely, but my point being is if they're competing with the public system and 28 becomes the norm in the public system, what's to stop a college like this from going from 16 to 20 and still being in a competitive advantage kind of position with respect to the public system that they're competing with?
Sure, thank you. And through you, Mr. Burton, I don't think the private schools are competing with the public schools, I think, to be fair. But the second thing is ultimately at the end of the day, that could happen today without this rezoning application. Though it could accommodate the same number of students that we're talking about today without the addition. The addition is really for the purpose of enhancing course offerings to the existing students, which may in fact result in more students, but more students could be there today without that addition. There could be 450 students there today. There's no cap on that. But that just hasn't been the market.
Okay, so I recognize that, but you are confirming for me there is no cap, there's no method by which there would be any regulation with respect to adding additional traffic levels, should that be the new business model of the college?
Sorry, through you, sir. If the new business model is to make large classrooms?
If the business model changed to enlarge the classes by some degree, there would be nothing stopping you.
There would be nothing stopping them today? No, that's correct.
Today or in the future?
Correct.
If the expansion occurred.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Planning TDM for normal times is fine. We've had a couple of people mention, though, that special events come up occasionally. I know that in the ward that Councillor Noel and I share, we have a private school in a roadway that's twice that size. Anytime there's a special event, there's bottlenecks, there's poor parking practices. What kind of TDM management do you plan for something like a convocation, for parent-teacher meetings, things like that?
Okay, so the understanding from I'm assuming this was last school year, was that they had the 2 Saturday open houses, so it's outside of a peak period. Saturday's not a peak traffic period. And 3 evening special events, so that would be occurring outside. So right there, by holding the events outside of those peak periods, you're not at 3 o'clock or not at 8 a.m. It is spacing out. And then you also have less pickup drop-off activity. So they're TDM measures, same thing. You could have traffic controls on the site. Busing parents in is probably not an option, but I think it would be just a much significantly lower amount of traffic, and then also not during those peak periods. So you're not going to see a level of service that's being exacerbated, because it's going to look more like the first picture that we had when you're looking down on the site. We're going to see pretty much free flow traffic and then people coming into the property.
That area of Trafalgar is a popular road, though. It's the one slender finger that really leads to downtown Oakville. So your peak period may not be the same as other people's peak periods. That could still be a problem, could it not?
I'm not a traffic engineer, but my thought would be that a peak period's a peak period. If
You know what,
we can ask
our traffic engineer's here, we'll bring him up.
Hi, good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair. I was just speaking to the owner of McLaughlin College there, and sort of one of the answers that was provided so far in terms of these larger events that occur typically off-peak hours, but where there could be more parents that are driving to school, such as open houses, they do use the Cornwall lot and bus the parents in. So that's where they're parking those vehicles off-site.
Okay, thank you.
And that will continue as well.
And just for my own edification, thank you for the traffic information. You'd mentioned STEAM classes. I assume you meant STEM.
Well, we have, okay, let me look at what the acronym is, what the A is.
I wondered the same thing. It's STEM with the addition of art.
Art, yeah.
So nobody's in towels
Yeah,
in
it's
the
the
room
admin
somewhere.
area.
There's no
Okay.
steamer.
Thank you very much.
I didn't think of that.
It's hard to keep up with what's hot. All right, we are now coming over to this side. We're starting with Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much. Quick question. 385 students, what year was that?
Do you know what year? 2007.
Okay. Next question is, after hearing all the residents tonight, are you going to go back and reconsider your application?
Well, we are in the process of reconsidering all the elements of it right now, how we can make it work better. So that is part of the 4 meetings. So we have, to be fair, we have heard all these concerns already through the 4 meetings, so it's good to hear it in this environment, but we're well aware of the concerns. So that's why we're looking at what we can do with the traffic, meeting with traffic engineering staff, looking at the TDM measures. So we are in that process right now, because we will need to make a resubmission of some of the reports. Clearly, the traffic report has been revised already.
And so we'll be seeing that later on, obviously.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you for your presentation. You've heard the residents talk about the fact that the traffic report didn't include Reynolds and Lawson in any level of detail. Will you be requesting a new traffic report that includes Reynolds, Lawson, Spruce, and the surrounding neighborhoods?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. We've updated the traffic study, as been said. It is before staff right now. We did include intersections that were not part of the original agreed-upon scope of work for the traffic study with town staff. So at this point, the intersection of Reynolds and McDonald has been added to the, McDonald and Reynolds has been added to the traffic impact study as per the direction of town staff.
So as a follow-up, would you, after hearing people's comments tonight, go back and include Lawson and reconsider whether or not the report is comprehensive enough for the neighborhood?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. We'll definitely take that back and we will discuss it with town staff in terms of what impact we foresee Lawson having with the school operating or any traffic that's using Lawson currently today.
Okay. Thank you for that. So this is not a traffic question. So with some of the changing information that's occurred, and this may be a staff question, I'm not sure, we have a May report coming back. Given the significance of the changes that you're proposing or say that you're going to be considering, is the May deadline still a May deadline?
Through your worship, the May deadline would have to be the same deadline, given that we'd like to make a recommendation to council within the non-decision timeframes of the Planning Act.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. My other question is about the parking behind the school. So one of the residents talked about how the parking behind the school currently creates a drop-off zone or a quaying, and it has now been eliminated. So from an absolute comparison perspective, how many parking spots currently exist on the property and quaying, and how many in the new proposal?
I have parking or queuing?
Both. So
Okay.
parking, separate the two. Parking spots today and then going forward, and queuing and going forward.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, our updated traffic impact study does have a figure. Unfortunately, the copy I have with me, the appendix, a couple of sheets are missing, but I believe from recollection, there's about 40 on-site queuing spaces under the existing configuration in terms of parking spaces or where queuing spaces where parents can stop in order to pick up their children. And I believe in the future condition, we have a figure showing, I believe, 37 or 38. So there is a slight drop in it, but I believe with the other methods in terms of the circulation, that overall we have an improvement in the pickup, particularly during the PM peak.
But through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we will certainly get you those numbers tomorrow.
And just,
Actually,
sorry,
as
sorry, if I just may add, because we had a question
ahead.
about what the residents mentioned. One concern we had was that people pulling into the property were being blocked by vehicles stopping. So effectively, a lot of the queuing actually wasn't available when that situation occurs because they're not even getting on site. So by enhancing the way the property is going to work and with the operations, people directing traffic, the queuing should actually be used more effectively.
Can I ask that, did you share the revised traffic study with the TCRA when you met with them a couple days ago? It just came to mind that you said you met with them 2 days ago, so I just wonder, are they aware of these and have they seen this revised report?
I believe the revised report has been submitted to traffic engineering staff for review,
Okay.
so it's
But
not yet available as a final report. But it will be circulated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Baker, Mr. Barton, welcome. Question regarding the concept plan figure 2. It shows a playground in behind the house to the south on Trafalgar Road. Is that an existing playground, or does that come into place as part of the proposal?
So it's a rear yard now, and so we're
Right.
talking about just a space that could be available for students to come out and play. It's not going to be transformed into like play structure or something like that. So because that space is available, I think there was that opportunity seen there for, as I mentioned, to be a maximum of 85 minutes a day, that it could be available for elementary students only.
So thank you for that. Where is the current play area or playground or field or whatever?
So most of it is in the rear now. So if you look on the site, this is the site plan you have in front of you. So in the rear,
Yep.
you can see where the sports field is. There is that area that's back there as well. So again, I heard a comment about, I felt it was a little bit conflicting about having more parking, but also providing green space. So it is a balancing act. So in this case here, trying to ensure that that rear yard, there would obviously parking potential there, but trying to ensure that that is the sports field, that's not functioning as a traffic area. So that was really part of the goal as well. So most of it would occur in that rear yard today.
Is Wallace Park in use, or is that more like a field trip? Or I'm just curious in terms of activities at parks in the area?
Yes, so the school makes regular use of it, yes? Okay, yeah, they regularly use it, yes.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Duddick, are you next? Thank you.
Thank you. Just going back on the heritage issue, you had mentioned that you were unaware of the comments that were provided through our Heritage Committee. Did you reach out to the Heritage staff through the course of this application, given the heritage component? And if so, when?
Yes, so as part of this, there is a heritage impact assessment. So the project architect worked closely with ATA on preparing that report in consultation with town staff. So there has been a lot of back and forth discussion to ensure that that report was prepared with all the proper considerations in mind. So there has been a lot of that discussion.
Okay, I guess I'm concerned with the comments that Ms. Baker had referenced, in that she was unaware of some of the comments I'd shared at the onset of the discussions here. And so I think at the appropriate time, I will make sure that staff, when they identify some of the issues, also make sure that the minutes or the discussions that took place in the Heritage Committee meeting when we discussed some of the concerns, whether it was landscaping or access on the property, get captured and shared with you. So it might have been a timing issue.
Sure, thank you, and through you, sir. That's our comments. My comments were exclusively related to in and around what occurred at that meeting, because we weren't there. So it wasn't in advance. We've certainly had those discussions in advance with on the HIA. It's the new comments about, in particular, about the comments about the lean-to and those sorts of things. So we're happy to work with whomever to have those discussions.
And when you referenced some of the requirements for providing the enhancements on the site were to provide the students an increased experience or enhancements to their curriculum or whatever, how is the staff residence applicable for that? I'm just wondering. That's not something I see at E.J. James. I don't see that at Brantwood. So maybe you can give me an indication what the need is for having a staff residence. I know they have it at Appleby. It's a whole different campus. But how many are actually going to be housed there?
Sure, thank you, and through you, sir. So the staff residence is the home of the headmaster. So it is currently functions as a single detached dwelling for a family and will continue to function as a single detached dwelling for the headmaster. Just happens to be the person who lives there is the headmaster of the school. So it's not a staff residence per se in terms of multiple people living there, or a student residence or anything like that. It's the home of
When
the
I see
headmaster.
that, I think of Appleby where there's several,
Oh, yeah.
per
No.
residence. Thank you.
No, thank you, and we'll certainly clarify that in any of the reports if we need to. Thank you.
Councillor Robertson?
I think that mine's a follow-up about the staff residence, because I thought there was a headmaster residence, and I thought the other one on Trafalgar was set as a staff residence. Am I incorrect on that?
Yes, sorry, and again, through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's the headmaster residence?
Yes.
And then the other school the other home, that one, is
Offices,
is office and classroom space.
okay. And there's not a third one then?
There is not a third one.
Just the two?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And I guess then my question is, in terms of staff parking, if you have an increase in students, you're going to have an increase in staff parking needed. Is there inclusion for that in this plan?
There was a brief mention, Mr. Heckton mentioned of the existing lease. So all staff park there today.
Okay.
And that was a decision made by McLaughlin when that lease was signed, was to put all staff there. That the intent is to continue that to ensure the best operations they can have at this location.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you. Well, the benefit about going last is most of your council colleagues have asked everything, so it saves me the time and effort. But my question is very simple. Are all the properties purchased, or is there any pending?
Yes, so they're all purchased. They're just not assembled into one block at this point.
Okay, but they're all in
They're
the
all
hands
owned
of
by,
McLaughlin.
so all the entities that we see on the application are all part of McLaughlin College.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and thank you, Ms. Baker and Mr. Barton, for your time and your information. We appreciate it very much. Madam Clerk, is there another delegation?
Next delegation is David Capper.
Mr. Capper. Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, I'm wondering if we could ask our colleagues in the IT department to switch me over to the fancy overhead camera that you have.
We'll see if our new camera works for you.
It works very well. Thank you, Your Worship. Members of council, for the record, my name is David Capper.
Mr. Capper, give us 1 second here. Council is waiting for the picture to, there we go.
Okay.
You know, it's, all I have to do is interrupt and it appears. It's a crazy system. Mr. Capper, I beg your pardon for the interruption. Please continue.
No problem. As I was saying, my name is David Capper with Glenn Schnarr & Associates. For the record, our municipal address is Unit 700 at 10 Kingsbridge Gardens Circle, Mississauga, Ontario, L5R3K6. Our firm represents the owners of the property located at 358 McDonald Road, which is the property immediately adjacent to the proposed driveway at 272 McDonald Road. And that is proposed egress for the proposed expansion. Our clients have no objection to the overall development proposal that has been submitted to the town, and they have no objections to the expansion of the existing educational facility. Our clients do have, however, want to raise a matter that they would like to have further investigated as part of the review of the proposed development application. Specifically, our client is looking to confirm that the proposed egress will not have an impact on the existing driveway that is located approximately where my pen is on the site. The site currently has 2 driveway accesses onto McDonald Road. There's one about 15 to 20 meters from the intersection of Reynolds and McDonald, and then there's a second egress over here. So we would just like, through the review of the application, for staff to confirm that the configuration of the proposed egress will not create a conflict between those 2 driveways. We'd like to ensure that there's an appropriate level of review that is conducted and to ensure that these 2 driveways can function appropriately without impact to one another. A very short submission to you, Your Worship, and I'm happy to answer any questions should there be.
Any questions for Mr. Capper? Well, with council's permission, I'd like to ask you for a little bit of help to understand your concern. Is that normally a question that would be considered at site plan, being egress and ingress? And is it, but because of the situation here, does that rise to the level of an issue that needs to be addressed in the consideration of the application instead of being put off to site plan? Is that what you're submitting to us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't believe there's an issue. We'd just like it to be raised at this point in time. I agree with you, this is not a site plan application, but it is a very detailed development concept for the property. There's not a lot of room for movement here with respect to that egress driveway. It's probably an appropriate configuration. We just would like to make sure that at some point in time, someone's looked at this so that in the future, we don't have an issue with that driveway after the fact.
So let me see if I'm capturing it. Your concern is you don't want to discover down the road at site plan that it's too late to save your client's driveway.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you've hit the nail on the head.
Well, thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you very much.
I don't always get to hit the nail on the head, so I appreciate that praise. Madam Clerk, the next delegation?
The last listed delegation is a George Webster, but he did not indicate which item he wished to speak to.
Mr. Webster? Welcome, Mr. Webster. We look forward to your information.
Hi, my name is George Webster. I live at 263 Trafalgar, which is a bit to the south of the school. Wanted to start out by saying that there's a lot of talk about community here tonight in this. We are a community in that area. That school is not part of our community. It does not service our community. It may service residents of Oakville, but our community doesn't have any kids in it. So it doesn't service that community. It's a foreign body in our community. I would recommend that you study Mark Boot's presentation very carefully. I think he made a very strong case for the fact that that school should never have been built in that site because it's too small. And now they want to make it bigger. I would make the point that as councillors, just because a private enterprise, a for-profit private enterprise, has gone ahead and invested their money in a plan that can only go in place if you approve it, puts no onus on you to approve it. Your decision should be based on sound reasons, not because, well, they bought the property, I guess we have to approve it. Now, I was here in this very spot a few years ago when they were proposing a little bit similar thing. The building that's now the chiropractor's office, they wanted to buy that and make that the headmaster's home and offices and so on. And we didn't like that either. And that proposal was, I think, withdrawn rather than turned down. At that time, there was a big question about how big that school was. And as far as I'm concerned, we left that meeting with the promise from the council, not you individuals necessarily, but from the council, that that school was capped at 300 and no more. Now we're talking 450. It's a tumor in the community, and it's growing. It's up to you to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Are there other members of the public with information for council's and staff's consideration on this file? If not, I'll look to the planning director to name the issues that he would like included. Sorry.
Through your worship to members of council, there's a lot of issues have been raised this evening. I note that the issues raised by the public, I was monitoring those as they were coming forward and comparing it to the list in the staff report, and fairly confident we've addressed those, and I've noted them as well in my own notes. With respect to issues that council specifically asked staff to report back on, I note the carriage house and the lean-to proposing to be removed. Has this been addressed? Explore if it can stay. Reinforce the focus, the loss of the fence and the visual impact that has on the front. We want us to look at that. The additional 40 parking spaces, 40 off-site parking spaces, how will this be secured? How will changes to the PPS or provincial policy statement affect this with this proposal? Will the traffic study look at McDonald and Trafalgar intersection? Will the traffic study look at Lawson and Reynolds? Will the traffic study be peer reviewed? Specifically, staff are to consider section 2.21 of the Livable Oakville plan to make sure that analysis is included in the final report. The community uses provisions and the policies in Livable Oakville should also be looked at in the final report. Can a cap on students be explored? How will the traffic demand management techniques handle special events? I believe. Confirm the parking and queuing numbers now and versus that of the proposal. How will the proposed playground operate? Staff shall forward heritage minutes and discussions of that nature to the applicant so they can be informed of it. And the neighbors to the north want to confirm that McDonald, this is actually from the last deputy, McDonald egress will not conflict with their driveway.
Councillor Chisholm, did you have something to add?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to staff. It came up in the last delegation, and thank you for your presentation, sir. This capping of 300, is there anything in our archives or past reports saying that there is a capital limit on the student enrollment at this school? Because if that's the case, why are we entertaining more students in the school?
Through your worship to the councillor. So the issue of the capping has been brought to our attention. We have met with some of the residents in advance. I know Mr. Hecht is aware of that issue. One of the problems we have is, I believe it was acknowledged in a 1996 staff report that there was a limit and a cap assigned, but we're still trying to understand how it is we would enforce that. And as I noted in my earlier report, I said we're looking at how we would, if there's a way, legal mechanism to cap the amount of students. I think it may be difficult from a legal standpoint.
Well, we've had that issue in many other sites through the years. I wonder if I could ask the possible inclusion of a couple of other points, Mr. Planning Director. I'm interested to know if the application upholds the intent and purpose of the Heritage District. And I'm not sure if that phrasing adds anything to your list, but if it does, I offer it. The second thing, I'm not sure how to frame, but one of the shortcomings that might exist in the revised traffic impact study is that and it may not exist, but I have a definite recollection in the 90s of, before I was involved in municipal politics, but as a mere resident, there was many a discussion of the Trafalgar Road being at or over its capacity. And as I understood it, that was one of council's arguments around the time of the determination of where in Oakville the urban growth center would go. My recollection is that the province offered to put the urban growth center, which now sits astride the Oakville GO station, I understood that the province originally intended to put it in downtown Oakville. And the way I recollected, although I was not a participant in those days, was that the Trafalgar Road was viewed as not having any spare capacity. And so I'm interested if the capacity of the road has been adequately plumbed. I salute the TDM efforts because they're always a good thing. Nobody likes traffic congestion. The next thing is, there's a policy that was quoted tonight, and that is that the transportation system, I fear that the policy might have been being read in a novel way. It was item K that talked about the transportation system should be adequate. As I understood that meant that we need to build the transportation system to handle the need, rather than an application has to fit the existing transportation system. So I'd like clarity on that. And if, as I suspect it's the way I suggested, then the question that I would like lodged in your list is it possible for us to expand the transportation system in this area to accommodate the proposed traffic? And I don't know where that'll take us, but it seems to me that the question is, are we at the limit of what we can do there? I have understood for generations that that is the town's position. I just I'd like to have that illuminated. And I think the bylaw 1996-121 that was cited earlier this evening needs to be chased down and understood whether it's valid or not. And there's a lovely piece in the province's laws that says council can pass invalid things, but it doesn't make them valid. So it seems to me that we need to discover whether that's valid or not. And then my biggest question for this is this overdevelopment? When we look at the land available for the other private schools, for the loading of students and staff, it does appear that this is a different degree of utilization of land. And so if the concept of overdevelopment is a planning concept, and I hope it is, but I'm not a planner or a lawyer, can you speak to, in your recommendation report, can you please speak to whether it's overdevelopment or not? And those are my suggestions. So if anyone has any others, please add them. Otherwise, we need a motion to accept the resolution as presented by the agenda and the planning director. Councillor Giddings, thank you. Discussion, all in favor? And that does carry. Thank you, everybody. The next public meeting report is the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision application for 47 Nelson Street. And we have a report from Robert Dunn, our senior planner. And for members of the council and the public, this also is an information gathering meeting, not a decision-making meeting on this application. And council, we've been sitting for a couple of hours, and a lot of people seem to be wanting to leave. I'm going to have a 2-minute recess if you want to get a drink or something, so that we can continue the meeting in a less disruptive way.
Wow. Squeak, squeaks. Squeaks just like you're at the bar. Oh, yeah. At the corral. Hello.
I'm Dr. Edith King. I'm an international health plan and researcher, PhD from Liverpool. And this is one of the best presentations I've witnessed here.
Oh, the one that just happened?
Yes.
Excellent. It wasn't me.
No, but what?
I'm Robert Sutton. I'm doing the next presentation for you. Okay.
Otherwise,
Beautiful. Okay. Well, Tony said that there were some fiber streets at the top that weren't overly an issue, but he didn't know where the big ones were.
Well, and that's the thing. We can't tell them that they're,
That's fine. Over our head. I agree.
over our heads. So
Yep.
let them work it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Thank everybody for your patience and understanding during the recess. And let me just ask one more time for order, please. Thank you. Maybe the audio doesn't carry back there. I don't know. Oh, thank you, everybody. All right, council and public, we are going to consider item number 2 now, and we're going to start with our presentation from our senior planner, Mr. Robert Thun.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. This is a statutory public meeting, as you had mentioned previously, for a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for 47 Nelson Street, and the ultimate development is related to 4 street townhouses. The report can be found on page 45 of tonight's agenda. And once again, as you'd mentioned, Your Worship, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to obtain any further information, public input, as related to this application. So it's an information finding session. Consideration of the zoning bylaw is required within 150 days, which is May 16th. The plan of subdivision timeframe is 180 days. However, staff will be returning because of the zoning bylaw timeframe at the May 13th, 2019 Planning and Development Council meeting with a recommendation. The slide before council right now and the members of the public is an air photo that identifies the site and a photo of the site itself and its context with the surrounding area. The subject property is located on the east side of Nelson Street, just south of Marine Drive. The property is 959 square meters in size and currently contains a single detached dwelling and a separate garage. Surrounding the property are residential uses in the forms of detached dwellings immediately to the north, multiple semi-detached dwellings to the west, so on the opposite side of Nelson Street, multiple attached dwellings to the east and to the south of the site, and also an apartment building kitty corner at the corner of Marine Drive and Nelson Street, the southwest corner. And the photo itself on the left side of the slide is the subject property looking at it eastward from Nelson Street. So as you can see, the single detached dwelling and the separate detached garage. From a proposal perspective, as I mentioned, it is for 4 street townhouses. This slide reflects this application as submitted. Vehicular access would be from Nelson Street via 3 driveways proposed. 47A and 47B units would have separate driveways. 47C and 47D Nelson Street would have one single driveway, and it will become U-shaped in front of the property, or in front of the dwelling, I should say. These units are 3 stories in height, and the application itself, or prior to the application being submitted, a community meeting was held by the applicant. It was held on September 25th, 2018, where they did receive some feedback prior to the application being submitted. This slide here is the front elevation from Nelson Street as submitted with the application. So as you can see, it is 3 stories. Garages in front there, parking for the site. The garages are will hold 2 cars, actually, because there will be a lift system employed. So the basement will have a parking space, and then the grade will have a parking space. In addition, the parking will also be within the driveway as proposed. So there's actually 3 parking spaces being proposed for each of these units. From the livable plan Oakville, or livable Oakville plan perspective, the site is within the Brawny Village growth area. And as can seen from the slide, it's medium density residential. That designation does permit multiple attached dwellings with a density range between 30 and 50 units per site hectare. The application does comply with the medium density designation as it is multiple attached in the built form, and it does have an approximate density of 42 units per site hectare. So both the form and the density comply. From a zoning bylaw perspective, before you is the existing and the proposed. Existing, the property is zoned ED, so basically what's there is permitted. Okay, the application itself seeks to rezone the subject property from ED to a site-specific RM1 zoning category. The special provision that is being asked for in the original application is an increase in height from 12 meters to 12.8 meters. So that's the overall height from established grade. It was noted through the review of the application that an additional special provision would be required, and that related to the existing lot frontage. And if I could just go back to the plan previous, the lot itself has 28.3 meters of frontage along Nelson Street. That is existing, that cannot be changed. So to rezone the property to the RM1, there is a requirement for a lot frontage of 30.5. The zoning would have to be amended to reflect the existing situation that's there right now. From a draft plan perspective, this is a one-block draft plan of subdivision, and the individual lots would be created through the part lot process in the future. In the staff report, staff have raised a number of issues that would be addressed within the recommendation report, and those principally are related to the impact of the development on the 4 street trees. As you've seen in the photo, going back, there are 2 trees that are shown right there. Those are town trees. There are 2 additional town trees on the frontage that have to be addressed. There was an arborist report that was submitted, and in that report, it did talk about hydrovacking or air spading to determine the root system. We have required that to be done before the recommendation report is submitted to council for consideration to determine what the impact with regards to the driveway and the services would be, if there are any. I can say that they attempted to do that this morning. Frost is still in the ground. They got it down about 6 inches or so, and they will come back in 2 weeks' time to continue that before the report is written and a recommendation is made to council. So that effort is being made. In addition, the ability to park in Unit 47C, as you can see from the site plan that's before you, the ability to park in the driveway space right there. Typically, a driving space is 6 meters deep. We want to make sure that the encroachment or there's a minimal encroachment onto the neighboring property, preferably no encroachment. We have to look at it, the increase in height that has been asked for in relation to the surrounding built form, the additional zoning regulation that would be required should this proceed. Zoning staff and myself have asked for confirmation of each individual lot's zoning compliance. And then also the provision for easements related to rear yard access, difficult bringing lawnmowers and whatnot through your house to get to the backyard. So what's the ability to deal with that? The built form itself, there are some encroachments or some areas, as an example, the front porch. To maintain that front porch, the unit 47C would have to go on 47B's property to put a ladder on it. So there's a potential for easements required there. And similarly for 47C and 47D, the aspect of driveway access. Those comments have been provided in the staff report, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if there are more issues that are being brought up tonight, welcome to hear those, and they will be described and reviewed as part of the recommendation report. I believe council does have a package of public comments in front of them that was distributed earlier. So in conclusion, Your Worship and members of council, staff are putting forth the following recommendation for council's consideration. Once again, can't stress enough that we're here to listen. We're here to understand what concerns are out there that have not been raised already, and we will review those as part of the technical review and return to council with the recommendation report on May 13th. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thun, for your usual concise and excellent report. Councillor Romero?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Thun. In the package we got, and as was brought up before, there was a conversation about any type of historical significance or archaeological things of significance. Has that been addressed, or is that going to be addressed?
Through you, Your Worship, my understanding that is being addressed. The Region of Halton has raised a condition, or raised a comment in their letter, which is appended, I think, as Appendix C of the staff report. It is a condition within the draft approval conditions that they have raised already. And it's more so to do a phase 2 for the open areas around the house itself.
So that will be addressed then in the course of from now to then. Just curious about the hydrovacing. How deep do they have to go?
Traditionally, I believe they're going to go down probably a foot or more. Right now, they're at about 6 inches in certain areas. And they want to look at more of the fibrous roots and also the larger roots to see where they are and the impacts to those related to the driveway construction, related to the installation of services. Like a water line can be bored, but a sanitary sewer line has to be tunneled or has to be excavated. So they have to look at that information and judge it accordingly.
And we'll take into consideration sort of compression from driveway and that sort of thing on the tree systems?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. That's all for now. Thank you.
Councillor Hazard-Thiel?
On the actual application, sorry, on the drawing that shows the EDs, ED 106, have we had any, do we have any knowledge about what might be proposed there?
I'm sorry?
Do we have any knowledge of what might be proposed at ED 106?
ED 106 actually is 3 single detached homes that exist already.
Okay.
And the ED represents what is there today. It is a placeholder in the sense of the OP looks at it as medium density residential. If it were ever to be developed in the future, it would be a zoning amendment in relation to the official plan.
But currently, if I understand you correctly, it's a single detached home.
There are 3 single detached homes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Longo?
Through your worship, thank you, Mr. Thun, for your presentation. Just a quick question. Under the list of studies that are on page 55, is there a shadow study that's going to be done? Just it talks about height being at 12 meters and proposing 12.8. Is there a shadow study that's going to be part of that to see if that impacts it?
Through your worship, there was no shadow study required for a 3-story building. It's not tall enough to warrant through the urban design staff warranting a shadow study.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. I have I'm afraid, a stupid question. The RM1 zoning that's being asked for here, you prompted this question when you pointed out that it needs a 30.5 meter frontage, and apparently there's 28.3 meters there.
That is correct.
And when Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel pointed out the ED 106 arrangement, it looked to me like the ED 106 with the 3 dwellings is on a similar amount of land to what we're talking about here on this application. And that's leading me to wonder, is this the appropriate degree and form of development for this land? Is the disparity in numbers telling us that there's a different format with maybe not 4 units. Are we evaluating the appropriateness of the amount of development on this particular piece of land?
Yes, we will be. Through you, your worship, going back to the zoning bylaw mapping, the RM1 141 and just to the south of this property, these 4 townhouses are actually 28 meters of lot frontage. So it's exactly the same as what is being proposed here. Unfortunately, this represents an existing situation, and the RM1 has a 30.5. So there actually is in the RM1 141 special provision a lot frontage of 28 meters.
Thank you very much. Listed delegations, would you call the delegations?
Our first delegation is Ian McDermott.
Welcome, Mr. McDermott. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much. Wait for the presentation to come up. Okay. Great. Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, Your Worship, councilors, city staff, neighbors, and friends that are here. This presentation is put together with input from many individuals working or living, within the community. 36 people have actually signed on the summary document that was submitted, and this is an overview of that document. We are not in favor of the current proposed development across the street. I personally live at 44 Nelson, which is right across the street from that. But what is really important is that there is no harmful impact of any development. Change is difficult for anybody, and we recognize that, and it's not against change. It's making sure that there is no harmful impact whatsoever. We also need to abide by the City of Oakville bylaws and standards. Those bylaws and standards were put in place for a particular reason. And specifically under the Livable Oakville Plan, Part F, Implementation and Interpretation, Sections 28 and 28.1 and 28.8, the intent of the bylaws is to ensure that the objectives of the bylaws and policies are implemented and that we reduce non-conforming uses. It doesn't mean that we then create bylaws that actually say that we should actually be doing non-conformities in there. There are 4 recommendations in the summary that was submitted to you. The first is to give due consideration to not permitting rezoning. It does not meet the requirements of an RM1 zoning, and I will go through that. However, if you do agree to actually development on the site, we actually strongly recommend reducing the height. I will talk about insurance compliance, built form with adjacent buildings, and reducing impact to the trees. And then very clearly, those driveway configurations will have serious impact on those trees, so that needs to actually change. And we believe that an independent arborist needs to be in place, not an arborist that is engaged by the actual developer. Otherwise, there's a conflict of interest with those trees, which are the property of the city. And then, obviously, as was brought up previously by Councilor O'Meara, there's the protection of the potential archaeological materials. So I'm going to address it in 3 areas: rezoning, tree protection, and archaeological potential. So first off, has been pointed out already by city staff, the actual requirements as per regulations are 30.5 meters and a maximum height of 12 meters. What was actually submitted by Oughtred and Associates on behalf of the developing team that is there is that they were actually indicating they were compliant at 30 meters. That was actually wrong. They only have 28.3 meters, so it seems inappropriate that they would submit documentation that actually says they're compliant when they're not. It also indicates that their special provision is required at 12.8 meters. That was noted before. The other issue is that the way these actually are set up is that under the Livable Oakville Plan, again, section 11.1.9, that there should be compatible setbacks and separations between the actual building units. And if I come back to this, you'll actually see while within an RM1 zone, which I remind you this does not actually comply with, they are allowed to have up, as little as 1.2 meters between buildings. However, if you look at it, buildings within the neighborhoods, they all have larger than 1.2 meters. They are recommending 1.6, but many of the buildings are much larger than that. So it doesn't fit within the community. Additionally, and this is just an attempt at actually trying to identify how high those buildings would be. The yellow lines represent the potential height of a 3-story building. You can see adjacent immediately south are the townhouses that are only 2 stories. And so that height is actually significantly different. It's also much higher than buildings to the east and buildings to the north, so it actually doesn't fit. And the livable plan says there actually should be continuity of height across the board. Now, just in fairness, I live across the street. I do live in the townhouse unit that is significantly higher, but you actually see the transition from a 2-story to a 3-story to an apartment dwelling, which is what the livable plan says, that if you're going to have changes in height, you should have continuity. But back in what was actually proposed here was actually something that will stand out as being significantly not compatible. You will see where there was development done along Ontario Street, where they did actually keep to compatible heights between the different developments that were done. There's also the significant issue of the trees. There is no question these trees must be preserved. A number of these trees, particular 1, 1, and 4, which are on either ends of the property, those trees, I don't know exactly how old they are, but they've got to be somewhere between 80 and 100 years old. Should those trees get damaged and have to come down, nobody in this room today is going to see those trees replaced in our lifetimes. And we cannot lose a valuable resource like that. You can also see that the height, and we've tried to estimate with that red line, the height of the townhouses. And those trees are going to be impacted. Not so much the tree 2, which has actually got a canopy currently that's outside the area, which you'll see on the screen on the right-hand side, is outside the area of the townhouses. But tree 1 and tree 4, both those canopies are impacted by those townhouses. So unless there was a complete elevation that showed that there was absolutely no way those trees were going to be touched by the townhouses, it certainly looks to us like they are actually going to be impacted just from the houses. And then from the driveway configuration, this is really, really problematic as far as I'm concerned. Based on the arborist report that was actually put in, there's a tree protection zone that's actually required. Those tree protection zones indicate the radius of areas in which you should not disturb the root base of the tree. And basically for trees 1, 2, and 4, in those proposed driveways, those tree protection zones are all not met. So for tree 1, the tree protection zone is 7.2 meters, which means it should have a radius of 3.6. But the driveway is only 2.7 meters away from the tree base. For tree 2, it should have a tree protection zone of 6 meters, and yet the driveway is only 2 meters away. So if you take it half, it's less than the 3 meters required. And for tree 4, it's only 2.4 meters, 4 or 5 meters away from the driveway, and yet it should have a tree protection zone of 6 meters or 3 meters as a radius. So it does not meet those requirements. There's also this whole issue around the archaeological. It's been brought up. I just want to reiterate that this was identified as significant area for potential artifacts in that area, and what I've outlined in red are the areas that were not previously disturbed, and all of those areas will need to be checked. So in conclusion, we're basically recommending that it not be rezoned to RM1. Not saying that we're not against change. We're okay with change, but it can't be an RM1. It does not meet those requirements. However, if you do proceed with something on that site, we actually want to see the height reduced to be compatible with the buildings on the north, south, and east sides of that. We want to make sure that the built forms from a distance between houses are also compatible with existing within the neighborhood, and there must be no harm to the trees. So in order to prevent harm to the trees, you have to come up with a different driveway configuration. Don't know how that would happen. I'm not here to try and solve that, but there has to be a different driveway configuration. And we have to ensure that any potential archaeological artifacts are protected. Thank you.
Thank you for your information, Mr. McDermott. Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, thank you for coming, and I agree with the issue regarding tree protection zone. I'm just trying to understand, you're 44, now are you right across the road?
Yes, sir,
And is
we
your
are.
house a four complexes also?
No, it's a duplex.
It's a duplex. So what is the height of your building?
I can't give you the exact height, but it would be at least as high as these buildings.
So it would be about the same height, so.
That's
No-
correct.
Okay, I'll get confirmation from Mr. Thun on that. But yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, it seemed like they're trying to mirror on the east side what you have on the west side.
I would agree with that. The issue is that on the on the west side, we go from a 2-story to a 3-story to an apartment. So there's actually a normal transition in building heights, which is what part of the livable Oakville plan says. On the east side, if they put that 3-story building in, there are no other buildings around it that are actually of that height. So there's no transition for those buildings.
I hear you. Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. Just to dovetail off of Councillor Elgar's comments, I would imagine that those 3 semis at the corner of Marine and Nelson that are existing dwelling right now are probably not going to stay that way forever. So I guess I just want to be sure that I'm hearing from you, if and when those get redeveloped, would you want to see the same transition higher down as is on your side then? So those 3 would potentially have to be much higher than a 3-story building in order to have the same effect as what you're explaining is proper on your side?
If that was something that was being proposed, I don't think you would have a lot of happy people there, but that is what you would actually be looking at to mirror the other side of the road. But I don't think anybody would be in agreement with that.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to find the consistency about
Yeah.
your transitioning argument. And then I have one question just about the RM1, and I'm gonna follow up with our staff as well, because we seem I'm hearing 2 things where it doesn't fit, but it does. Existing dwelling is a snapshot in time of what we have, and we can't retroactively fit it in. So if we were able to get everything to come into conformity, height-wise, size-wise, is it the 4 that you're not happy with? And if it was 3, it would be better, but I'm just trying to find out is it just that it doesn't fit with the existing policy, it doesn't matter what it is, or is it what it is and the policy is the tool to get it there?
So the issue really is around non-conforming, right? So the whole idea around the livable Oakville plan is that it should be conforming. So in RM1, it doesn't meet that. And I'm not here to try and judge what actually would be an appropriate width. Maybe 3 houses on there that are lower with, better setbacks from the neighbors. Maybe that would work and allow for a driveway configuration. I don't know what the options would be. I believe that change is going to happen, and I don't believe anybody that's actually we've talked with is actually against the change. We're just against the change of the height, the massing, the fact that they're putting 4 townhouses on the zoning that actually doesn't meet the requirements, both from a height and a width perspective.
Okay, thanks. And lastly, so they would be allowed to get to 12 meters. That's legally allowed.
Understood.
So 0.8 is just a couple of feet. So the height one could be taken care of just by 0.8 of a meter, and you guys would be okay with that then?
Well, it would meet the zoning requirements. We can't argue with that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor, and Councillor, all right. Mr. McDermott, thank you very much for your information and your time. Madam Clerk, is there another delegation?
Yes, there is. The next delegation is Sheila Menez.
Welcome, Ms. Menez. Council looks forward to your information.
My name's Sheila Manise, and excuse me, I reside at 38 Nelson, which is on the other side of the street. And this is a personal perspective in the defense of the trees outside 47. Okay, From outside our home, the Manitoba maple is the first thing we see in the morning and the last when closing the drapes at night. In summer, we position our balcony chairs to face these beauties, preferring that view over a much narrower view of the lake. Today, we and many neighbors fear for the trees' safety. One arborist report I read said all 4 trees are in good shape, but 3 have only a fair structure. When the ground is disturbed during construction, will these trees be compromised? These trees define our block, a block with a storied past. In the 50s, cottagers were drawn to the small summer homes on the street. Some hardworking, regular folk and some powerful, larger folk like the Hindmarsh family vacationed here. On one corner, there was a former blacksmith shop which has been lovingly restored. On the other, iconic books were penned by the notable Peter Newman. These 100-year-old trees should be part of this roster. We need their continued presence on our street. I leave you with an ancient proverb that applies equally today. A society grows great when old men plant trees they know they will never sit in the shade of. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manise. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Our last listed delegation for this item is Arlene Beaumont.
Ms. Beaumont, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Arlene Beaumont, Outred and Associates. We are the agents for the owners of 47 Nelson Street. I have a very brief PowerPoint presentation. For those people who were at our community meeting in September, this will be a bit of a repeat. However, we have revised the application or are in the process of working with staff to revise the application, and I will point out the revisions as I go through this very quickly. I'll skip over the slides that have been adequately handled by Mr. Thun. You already know where the site is located. So we're in the Bronte Village is a designated growth area in the official plan. The subject property is designated medium-density residential in the official plan and is located outside the Bronte Village Main Street district. The official plan states that medium-density residential lands will accommodate 30 to 50 dwelling units per hectare. When you work out the math on our site, you're looking at 42.1 dwelling units per hectare, so right in that range. For lands outside the Main Street district, some intensification is anticipated as permitted by the applicable land use designation. As Mr. Sun said, it's currently zoned ED. And the existing ED is existing development, which really permits only the existing use. Whatever you want to do with the property, you're going to need to rezone it unless you're looking at rebuilding the existing home. So the application is to rezone to RM1, and this is consistent with the medium density residential designation from the official plan. I'll just very briefly go through the zone standards. There's some discussion about the lot areas for each of the units. We're actually at the smallest lot area would be 208 square meters. The bylaw requires 135 square meters, so well over the minimum lot area. As is pointed out, our lot frontage is deficient. The lot is the lot. I can't make any more land, so we're a little over a meter and a half, meter 0.7 short on the frontage. However, we do have sufficient area, as I pointed out. One of the things we have done is we have decided to move the building back about half a meter. That is to match it with the setback of the building to the south, which I believe is 43 Nelson Street. The rear yard has actually been reduced a little bit because we've sort of shifted the building back by half a meter. So we've reduced the rear yard by about half a meter, but we still meet the minimum rear yard requirements. The stories are still 3, But we are going to reduce the height to 12 meters. We've heard the community, and we understand that that's a big problem, so we will be reducing to 12 meters. Landscaping, we are well above what's required, and as Mr. Thun pointed out, we have two garage spaces, interior spaces, and because we have shifted the building back, we now have lots of space on each driveway to accommodate car parking on each driveway. So as I said, I've just gone through all of those changes. In addition, because we've shifted the building back and reduced the rear yards, we've also reduced the sizes of the decks, and we've taken out the fireplaces. We had originally proposed exterior fireplaces on all those decks. Those fireplaces have now been removed from the plan. So here is our revised site plan. As you can see, we've moved back a little bit so that we're trying to match the setback of the next door neighbor. These are our new proposed elevations, very similar. There's a little bit of the roof line has changed, but otherwise similar to what we were proposing before. Rear elevations. We do have a concept landscape plan. Again, at this stage, this is concept, but we are looking to do a nice job with landscaping. And our tree protection plan. I would like to just mention that we were out on site today doing excavation. We had to unfortunately abandon that because the ground was too frozen. We had hoped, because of last week's warm weather, that it would have helped the situation, but it didn't. So we hope to go back in 2 weeks' time to finish our excavation, to take a look at those tree roots. We are committed to working with the town. Our owners do not want to lose those trees. They will be living on this property. They intend to maintain one unit for their own use, for their own family, and the other 3 units will be sold. So they're committed to keeping those trees in good, healthy shape during the construction process. The town arborist was out on site with us today. I met with him on site, as was our arborist, and we are committed to finding a solution for the driveways and for the servicing. Does anybody have any questions?
Councillor Elver?
I think the trees are going to be your biggest problem. If there is no solution, what are you going to do?
If there's no solution for the trees, we're going to have to relook at this. We may change the application completely. I don't know at this point.
Okay, I thank you. Good answer.
Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. A question came up about the setback of the homes from the tree canopy. Can you maybe just tell us what that's going to look like on a second or third story in terms of the interface with the tree canopy?
Well, as I said, that was one of the things that was brought up to us, is the tree canopy and being too close to our building. So we have moved the building back by about 50 centimeters. From what the arborist said, that tree canopy is very high, so it should not, our buildings should not be interfering with the tree canopy. Even before, with the previous setback, he felt that it would not interfere, but as I said, we've moved a half a meter back, so that should improve the condition even more. He does not feel that we're going to have an issue with construction and the face of the building interfering with the tree canopy.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Dudek?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. In regards to the trees and the driveway configuration, are you considering what kind of like non-pervious, that sort of treatment, so that the roots can actually get the water versus, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bowman, for your information and your time. That was the last listed delegation we have. Are there other members of the public with information for council and staff on this matter? Well, then I'll confine it to table and look for a motion to receive the information from Councillor Robertson and, I beg your pardon? I know, I'm about to ask him for them. Councillor Parmer, did you want to stop me before I proceed? Thank you. Mr. Simeone, would you like to add the listed items, if any have been discovered tonight, to the motion?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I've noted that there was historical and archaeological investigation should occur. I also note that there's obviously issues regarding tree preservation and with our own town arborist. And Your Worship, I took one from you. Is this the appropriate amount of units given the ED 106 development to the north? Did you want that one to stand on the list?
Actually, the discussion led me to wonder if this is in fact the appropriate form of development. And, you know, someone pointed out that there's an apartment building down the street. And I start to wonder if the effort to build, you know, when I was doing the, you know, quick and dirty math, I guess in theory there's 113.2 meters to divide for frontages. And that's, as I make it, like about, that would fit 3 units and 3/4 or 77% of another unit, which led me to wonder, is the problem arising from the fact that we're trying to put townhouses where something else might fit? And I don't know if that's the kind of help that planning department gives applicants or not, but it certainly, and I'm not even sure it registers as a planning issue. But I would just ask, is this the appropriate form of development?
Okay, that'll be added to the list. Thank you.
So is everybody good with that? Councillor O'Meara?
Sorry, and just if we can ensure that the tree canopy and the house interface is marked down for comments as well. Thank you.
All right, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Thank you, everybody. Item number 3, the public meeting report for the zoning bylaw amendment and from the design quorum for 79 Wilson Street. And if you give your attention to our planner, Ms. Melissa Dalrymple, we will frame this discussion. Once again, this is an information report, not a decision report. Councillor Hazlitt Thiel has moved a motion to go past the hour. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's enough. It carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. As you mentioned, this is a public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment at 79 Wilson Street. This air photo identifies the site and its context with the surrounding area. The subject lands are located on the east side of Wilson Street, north of Burnett Street, and south of Lakeshore Road West. Surrounding land uses include a 3-story apartment building to the north, its associated parking lot to the east, residential uses to the south, and commercial uses to the west. The site is within the Kerr Village growth area and is designated low-density residential. The subject plans are identified within a transition area that's located south of Lakeshore Road West and north of the residential neighborhood to the south. Livable Oakville contains additional policies in this transition area to ensure that a sensitive transition and compatibility with the residential neighborhood to the south are maintained. Beyond the low-density residential uses permitted on the property, the transition policies also allow for medium-density residential uses. The proposal conforms with the Livable Oakville plan in terms of use. However, although only 1 additional unit is proposed to be added to the site, the resulting density would be 54 units per hectare, which falls within the high-density residential range. The site is zoned Central Business District, Special Provision 149. The application as submitted is seeking a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment to allow new semi-detached dwellings as a permitted use and to permit a reduced south side yard setback. Through the technical review, a number of areas of zoning noncompliance have been identified, which are outlined on pages 8 through 10 of the staff report. These deviations from the zoning bylaw include to permit reduced interior side yards, reduced landscape width, reduced parking space dimensions, reduced driveway width, increased height, reduced first-story height, increased balcony projections, and to permit unenclosed access stairs in the front yard. This slide shows the proposed site layout. The proposed development would allow the construction of one 3-story building with a basement containing 2 semi-detached dwellings. The proposed building is sited close to the street, and a surface parking area is located in the rear yard. Each unit is proposed to include a deck accessible from the 2nd floor, as well as a 3rd-floor rooftop patio. Vehicle access to the 2 private garages in the rear yard and the surface parking area is provided by a driveway on the north side of the property. This driveway is shared with 83 Wilson Street. A copy of the deed confirming the driveway is registered on title was submitted with the application. The private garages are sufficient in width to accommodate 1 vehicle each, and 3 parking spaces are available within the surface parking area. Therefore, the proposed parking exceeds the minimum parking requirements of the zoning bylaw, being 4 parking spaces or 2 per dwelling unit. This slide shows the front and rear elevations of the proposed building. After the completion of the staff report, the technical review of the file was also completed. A number of matters were raised that aren't contained in the staff report. These matters require resubmission and recirculation of the file to address comments related to the following things. From a planning and urban design perspective, as previously mentioned, to implement the development as it's currently proposed, a number of variations to the standards of the zoning bylaw would be required. In our opinion, alternate design solutions that more closely meet the standards of the bylaw should be explored to ensure the proposal satisfies the intent of the livable Oakville transition policies. A better transition in terms of height should be considered, opportunities for landscaping should be explored, and also the proposed building setbacks, particularly with respect to the south yard setback, should be addressed. Additional details are also required in terms of grading and servicing, and greater clarification is required with respect to vehicle maneuvering, access, and turning movements within the surface parking area. A full package of staff comments has been provided to the applicant, and staff will be meeting with the applicant later this week to discuss. In addition to a response to the technical review comments, this slide identifies matters that need to be addressed in the recommendation report. And consideration of this zoning bylaw amendment is required within 150 days. In this case, that would be June 7th, 2019. So staff will return with a recommendation report at the May 13th Planning and Development meeting. And to conclude, staff put forth the following recommendation for council's consideration.
Thank you very much for a very good report. Speaking only for myself, you've captured all the issues I had on this site. So you've left me with nothing to contribute. So thank you for a thorough report. Are there questions from council? Let me start down at the end with Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, I agree with what the mayor has just referenced in terms of capturing the issues. I guess the fact that having had that public information meeting with area residents, and it's listed in the context of the report here, are those also being captured? Like their concerns was loss of privacy, sun shadow impacts, construction management, all those factors that were listed here have been adequately captured?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the summary of the public information meeting held by the applicant led me to believe that most of the matters raised were questions that were answered at that meeting. And I hadn't heard any response from the public in response to the notice of complete application. I was curious if anyone would turn out tonight to reiterate those concerns, but certainly we can look through each item identified at the PIM in more detail in the recommendation report.
I think that would be helpful because I know that Councillor Chisholm and myself were able to attend, and it was very beneficial. I commend the applicant for hosting it at the onset, but my concern was capturing their comments in regards to specifics as they related to some of these issues that you've sort of captured in the body of the report, so maybe we can just have a discussion offline.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Chisholm?
Thank you, Your Worship, to the staff. I guess the question is the possible 4 stories with respect to the rooftop penthouse deems a story. It's saying should. After our analysis, would there be a classification, this is a story or not a story?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would get additional details from the applicant that would flesh out whether or not, for zoning purposes, it's classified as a 4th story or not. So I anticipate our meeting with the applicant later this week will begin to learn some of those details.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, thank you for the report. I note in your report, I'm just questioning is, does staff have any concerns that all of the trees on this site will have to be removed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, of course, we share those concerns.
So that'll be a concern raised going forward on this?
One of the concerns that's been raised in the staff comments report provided to the applicant was the lack of landscaping on site, that it's effectively a building and paved area, and that there hasn't been an opportunity for any buffering or landscaping to be provided as it's proposed today. So that will be looked into further by the applicant, and we would expect the resubmission would include additional areas for landscaping.
So what is the current tree canopy on that property? It seems very high. Oh, if you look at overhead of an aerial view.
I don't have that information tonight.
Perhaps we could, when the report comes back, specify what it is currently and what it will be when the new build happens, not 50 years from now. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Other questions? Are there registered delegations for this, Madam Clerk?
We have one delegation, Stephen Blue.
Mr. Blue?
Blood?
Blood?
Oh.
We apologize.
This is really kind of a casual presentation. The tenants of Snow Manor, which is the apartment building to the north of the site, had some concerns, and I was the one that was available to come and visit and present it to you. And so there's a bit of a signed petition, and it says basically, we, the tenants of Snow Manor, apartment building at 83 Wilson Street with 14 rental units, have major concerns about the proposed construction of 2 townhouses immediately to the south of our building. We object to the construction for the following reasons, and I'll probably suggest some mitigation measures that should be considered once I get through them. This was put together by somebody else. So the lengthy and considerable appalling dust, dirt disruption during excavation, destruction, and construction. I'm not sure there's any way around that, but we'll be concerned about details of hoardings and protection of the roadway that shared between the apartment building and obviously 14 cars on one side and 4 on the other. And the work hours, again, that they would be working so close to a building with a lot of people. The second one was driveway and parking disruption for the Snow Manor residents. And there the concern would be keeping the lane open at all times, or if not, what the mitigating measures would be. 3 would be the destruction of several old, fully grown trees, and I think that was already brought up. Basically, they're going to try and protect 2 city trees that are off the site, but all the trees on the site are going to be removed, and it would be interesting to see whether any kind of, well, I mean, there's a tree protection plan, but is there any attempt to provide additional or new trees to replace the trees that are being removed? There's not a whole lot of room for landscaping, so I'm not sure how practical that's going to be. The destruction of south-facing views over the neighborhood to the lake and the sky. I'm not sure that that's close to the sun shading issue. I'm not sure we can protect our views, but the positioning the building within 4 feet of the sight line. The existing apartment building is more like 3 meters from the lot line, so there's a fair number of windows on that side, including bedroom windows, and they're going to be significantly affected because this building projects far into the site, so a number of apartments will no longer get any sun. I guess the next one has to do with density. It's overcrowded look to the street and neighborhood, and I think that's just talking about this building's going to be essentially as tall as the 3-story apartment building, which is pretty out of place already, and this is not going to help. And I suspect that the neighbor to the south is, if they're not here, probably should be more concerned than we are in terms of how that's going to. Okay. Let's see, loss of an attractive old house that perfectly suits the neighborhood. So I guess that's saying, why not leave it? And then the loss of sunlight to our lakefront apartments, and I've sort of mentioned that already. I had some additional concerns just looking at the proposed plans with the whole roof patio. There are a couple of things. One is there's a mechanical penthouse, which looks more like a bedroom possibility to me. I can't imagine what mechanical equipment is going to be up there. And it leads onto a patio, which is been shown as 2 meters from the edge of the roof, but the edge of the roof they're talking about is the eaves 2 stories below. It's really actually at the very edge of the slope roof, so I assume that the 2-meter setback is meant to provide privacy to the adjacent properties, and in this case there will be none because you're basically right standing at the edge, so you might have some privacy of your own, but nobody in the other houses will. And I think that's the main one. That's it.
Thank you very much for a very well-done presentation. Councillor Dudek has a question.
Thank you. Not so much a question, but just an assurance. Some of the issues that you raised at the onset of your presentation are more related to the construction and staging and handling of the site, and we have a separate process that deals with that, so I'm glad you narrowed it down to the ones specific to the site, the windows, for example, the trees, the landscaping, and the impacts. Thank you.
Again, it's a list that I came upon. So.
And the overlook, but that was, I think, a very good catch.
Yeah. And hopefully this was similar to what the other residents in the apartment building went to the initial, so.
Thank you very much for your information and your time.
Thanks.
Madam Clerk, is there another delegation? Are there other members of the public with information for staff or the council? Yes, sir. Would you like to come forward? Please introduce yourself and share your information.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. My name is Martin Lucas, and I live due south of this construction. I have absolutely no problems whatsoever with what the client is trying to do. They have been incredibly supportive of making sure my concerns were addressed. My concerns were, as what the Snow Manor concerns were, height, shadowing, where it is on the property. It's quite close to my property line. We have no problems with that. I'm not sure, I'm not dead sure, I won't quote the numbers. The height is not much more than the height of my house, as it is now. So when we talk about the height, the earlier presentation was about a transition in Bronte. Well, this is a lovely transition. My house is about 1 meter higher than the roof peak of my house, much lower than 4 stories of Snow Manor. There is a sugar maple tree that is on our property, not on our property, it's the town tree, it's just south, beautifully protected, well out of the way of this property. There is one small, silverbark tree, which is a little bit raggedy. That's going to be in trouble, but it doesn't look very good right now. It's got a lot of damage to it from the years. And there's a very small bush to the corner, which will be in trouble if they build this when they build this property. So I just want to reiterate, I have absolutely no problem. It is positioned on the lot perfectly, in my opinion, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you very much for taking the time to share that with us. Are there other members? Yes, sir. Would you like to please come introduce yourself, share your information?
Good evening. Thanks for extending. My name's Jonathan Sprossett. I'm with DQI. We designed the project. I think I have to give a bit of background because we did have a meeting in the summer with Snow Manor, with all the other people. I'm not sure that you were there, so no. But we explained the process that we went through to come up with the design that we came with. There is a mutual drive to the north side. We didn't want to have more parking in front. We didn't want to have driveways in front. We didn't want to have garage doors in front. It's a very tricky situation. It is a transition property. It goes from low-density residential to the south to central business district to the north, west, and east, because it's sort of wrapped around. When you look at it in the master plan or in the livable Oakville plan, it's really hard to see that it actually sits there now as a low-density major designation, but before it was changed, which was changed while we've been doing the design. In fact, it was changed after we did our presentation for preliminary review. It was central business district, which allows for a 4 to 6 story building on the site. Yes, it needs a 3-meter setback from low-density residential, but we didn't think it was the right thing to do on the site. So first of all, we wanted to look at the house as it sat, because it's claimed to be a nice house in the neighborhood. And if we could have used that, the clients would have liked to. But it's sitting on only a partial rubble foundation, and it doesn't have any legs to go into the future without taking it right down anyway, which will impact one tree on the property, which is the only tree that's there, which is next to the mutual drive. The mutual drive is substandard. It is a true mutual drive, but it's only 1.12 meters into each property. Mutual drives now have to be 3 meters or 1.5 meters into each property. But because we can't ask Snow Manor to increase the size of the drive, we've taken it onto our property. That moving of the mutual drive goes into the tree. There's 2 other trees on the property. They're actually town trees, not on the property, but town trees, and they are right now in the middle of the mutual drive. I don't know how they got there or why they're there, but because Snow Manor has a wider driveway, people just drive around them. So the 3 trees that are coming down, we wanted to keep all of them, but because of the mutual drive, those 3 have to go. The rest of the canopy will stay. There's not a lot of room on the property, but it is a great property. It's right in downtown Oakville. It's part of the Kerr Street area. And having a proper transition is imperative. So Martin's house to the south being a 2-story single-family house, and Snow Manor to the north being a 3.5-story. It's not really a 4-story, it's not a 3-story, it's a 3.5-story. We went 3, 2, 4, 3. We thought it was a great transition. And if the mechanical room is too big to be a mechanical room, we'll make it smaller. We just showed on the drawing what is required for access to the roof and worked it into the roof lines. Another major thing that we did architecturally was to bring the roof line down. Snow Manor, the soffit is at 3.5 stories. On Martin's house, it's at 1.5 to 2 stories. So we brought ours down to 1.5 stories. So the soffit is where the roof comes down to. The house does project up beyond that, but when you're reading it from the street, you read the soffit. So that brings the house down as well. So there was a lot of design consideration. There was a lot of consideration on the owner's part for all the neighbors, not just Snow Manor and not just Martin to the south, but all of them, even in Vidiata across the street, what they were going to see, and even the tree in front. The setback was set by the existing house. We're 1 meter closer to the road than the existing house, which was allowable. We're further from the south property line than the existing house because we wanted to leave more room for Martin and to get a full 1.2 meters. It says on the application that we're below the 1.2 meters, but that's because there's a small projection for a future elevator, which is only to grade. It doesn't go above, but on the survey, it looks like it's less. The parking, again, a little bit of an apology. And the reason I didn't go on the delegation list is we were supposed to have a meeting earlier this week or last week with town, but there was a sickness, so they canceled it. We were supposed to do it at the end of last week. That didn't happen, so we're doing it later this week. So a lot of these things that are brought up about smaller parking, difficult turning in the back, all of those were going to be addressed at that, but we didn't get a chance to address it. So it will be addressed because it does work properly. There are 6-meter driveways, there's 6-meter parking spaces, or 5.7, sorry, for the indoor, and the widths are all fine. So I just wanted to apologize for not being on the delegation list because we were waiting for that meeting and it didn't happen, and then we thought this might be postponed. But I hope I addressed some of the concerns. We did have a great public meeting. We had a great turnout. I think there were 20 people or so, and we explained all the things that we went through there. But I apologize for not being properly prepared to address these things tonight.
On behalf of council, I forgive you. I don't think you actually committed any act that needs an apology. And the purpose of tonight is to ventilate or bring to light issues, and it's not incumbent upon you to solve them here. It's incumbent on you to solve them in time for the recommendation report later this spring or summer. Oh wait, spring is the season I'm waiting for. Yeah. So Councillor Chisholm, then Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. Going on your comments, you've confirmed what I was just going to say. It's a received report tonight. There's still ample time to work out the details, and thank you very much for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Mr. Dudek.
Thank you. For you to the delegate, thank you again. As I said, I thought that meeting was very proactive, and it was a great opportunity to flesh out a lot of the concerns around the table. I guess my question is, and I don't recall, did you have a sign-in sheet for people who attended that meeting?
Yes, we did. I think most people signed it. I didn't think everybody signed it.
Okay.
But we do have that.
Is there an opportunity you can share that with staff, just so that as this goes through, I anticipate they've been notified anyway in terms of public process and the, circulation area. But I guess being so close proximity and the fact they came out to that first meeting, it would just be a nice way to sort of close the loop so that they're fully aware. And even though the gentleman did delegate on their behalf, there's several there that I think are not comfortable in a public meeting, so that's why I'm just wanting to confirm.
The tree was one of the major ones that's sort of in the driveway too, just to the south of the thing. And we would have loved to save the tree. It's not a big tree, but it's nothing like the town tree in front.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't create a whole lot of canopy because it's right against the house, but it's anytime we can, we try and save the tree. There is a nice tree canopy from the house to the south east. There are about 4 trees on that property that canopy over, and we've kept the house forward and the deck over so that it doesn't interfere with that canopy. It is a small urban site, but we've tried our best.
Yes, you've done a good job. I guess the other concern I had, or I'd heard at that meeting, was indicated this evening in regards to the windows and the sort of dialogue with the neighboring building, so.
And we did adjust those so that they were in front of the building.
That'd be nice for them to realize that you've made those accommodations, so thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other members of the public with information? Thank you, everybody. I'll confine it to table, and I'll look for a motion to receive the information. Councillor Chisholm. Planning Director Simeone, do you want to add any issues to your list, or have we?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Consider matters raised by the public at the public meeting in the context of the final report. Further review as to what constitutes the 4th story, and what is the current tree canopy on site, and what will it be as a result of this proposal?
Thank you. The motion is by Councillor Chisholm. Is everybody satisfied? All those in favor? Councillor Dudek?
I just wanted to confirm that the comments that were shared in the context of the report, those will be captured as well. They're in writing, so I'm not really, thank you.
May I call the vote? All those in favor? opposed if any, and that's carried. And now, we turn to item number 4, and Councillor Dudek has distributed an additional suggestion, an additional item to be included, if you agree. And I'll just read it out for the benefit of the public. If we can't put it on the overhead projector, which we may be able to do, that the owner shall prepare and implement a landscape plan as it affects the rear lot lines of lots 2 through 8, so as to supplement the existing trees and vegetation that will remain in accordance with the required tree preservation plan prior to registration to the satisfaction of the town. Further, the owner shall prepare the landscape plan in consultation with the immediately abutting landowners, wherein the owner shall advise town staff how the outcome of this consultation informed the preparation of the landscape plan. And depending on there you go. You probably can read that. I can read it. So are there any delegations on this matter? So council, given the hour,
Sorry, there is.
we have a delegation and we have 14 minutes.
I got a question.
So we need a motion to proceed past the hour, past 10:30. Councillor Giddings, thank you. All those in favor, raise them high. That carries very well. Thank you, everybody. Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to provide some context as to the reason for the amendment. The concern I have is the existing owners to the east of this site, and the fact that there's reference to buffering and the preservation of the trees along that line, but I'm concerned about loss of privacy, overlook, those sort of things that we usually, for lack of a better word, massage through site plan on occasion. This provides that opportunity, so there's an additional opportunity for the public to provide input as to concerns they may have.
Thank you, Councillor. I, for one, certainly support your recommendation. Council, I was going to ask Mr. Barrett to give us the presentation before we launched on questions, but I heard from you, Councillor Elgar, you have a question?
My question is, and thank you very much, page 112 of the report, I note that there's 234 trees, 166 are on the subject lands, which leaves 68, 2 are town trees. And then I noticed in the report that said all of the 66 neighboring trees used the word could be preserved. Why would it say could? Wouldn't it say will or shall? Like that we will have no impact instead of could be? I worry about the word could. I'm wondering what the reason for that pick of the word would be.
Through your worship, the reason the word could was used because some of the trees are ash trees, are in poor condition, and they weren't recommended for preservation. However, there will be 10.5-meter minimum rear yard setback, so preservation of trees on adjacent lands will occur.
So, but we won't be negatively impacting those trees. It's just that you're saying they're ash trees and those are the residence trees on their side, correct?
Neighboring trees would be on adjacent lands.
But it won't be because of the impact of this development.
Through your worship, that's correct.
Okay, then it goes on to say that of the 92 boundary trees which are on the site, they'll all be saved with the exception of trees not suitable for preservation. How many of those are not suitable for preservation? Like they're all going to be saved, but except for the ones that aren't suitable. I'm just trying to, when I look at the wording, I'm just wondering what does that really mean?
Yeah, so through you, your worship, a preliminary tree preservation plan was submitted in support of the application, and it identified trees which can be preserved, trees which would be reviewed in detailed design through the engineering submissions, and then trees which aren't suitable for preservation, either due to their poor condition, undesirable species, et cetera. So in terms of the boundary trees, it was a very small proportion of those trees which fell into the category of poor condition or an undesirable species.
Okay, so we don't have the details of the specific details yet of that.
Through you, your worship, as a condition of approval, a final tree preservation plan will be required, where the grading of the subdivision together with an arborist report will be reviewed in detail to the satisfaction of the town.
Okay, okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I need to correct my faulty procedure. I need a motion to waive the procedure bylaw, and I need a supermajority to pass that. Councillor Dudek, thank you for the motion. All those in favor, raise them high. Put them all up, please. I have to count you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 8. Okay, you make it. Now we need a motion to continue past the 10:30. Can I have that again? Councillor Giddings, all in favor? Raise them high. I got to count them again. That's good. Thank you, everybody. Madam Clerk, thank you for the assistance on that. So we've gotten a few questions out of the way. Mr. Barrett, I always enjoy your presentations, and I think in this case, this is a fairly significant development. It might be good to have it. Would you please present?
Absolutely.
I'll just mention to technical staff, oh good, you've caught it. Thank you.
The item number 4 there. Yeah, thank you.
You might need the keyboard to change slides.
Okay.
And then F5. Yeah, you can just hit down and it'll be your next slide.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. A draft plan of subdivision application was submitted by Majestic Edge Estates, and the recommendation report can be found on page 93 of tonight's agenda. The subject lands are located on the south side of Lakeshore Road West, west of Shorewood Place. The subdivision application proposes to develop 18 lots for single detached dwellings fronting onto a new public road. Since the statutory public meeting was held, the draft plan of subdivision was amended, which resulted in an overall reduction of 1 lot from 19 lots to 18 lots, increased lot size and frontage to comply with the RL1 suffix 0 zoning performance standards, reorientation of the cul-de-sac towards the west, increased width of the public walkway block, a reduction in width of the public street from 18 meters to 17 meters, and provision of an urban cross-section, and adjustments to the size and shape of the linear waterfront parkland dedication based on the technical review of the application. The subject lands outlined in green in this slide are comprised of a large waterfront estate lot which extends from Lakeshore Road West to Lake Ontario and is located within a special policy area which extends from Shorewood Place to Appleby College, which is outlined in black in this slide. The Livable Oakville plan provides that the special policy area is intended to protect the unique character of this area within the town. Due to the special attributes of the large lots and related homes in the special policy area, intensification is to be limited to development which maintains the integrity of the large lots. Densities in the special policy area are not to exceed 10 units per site hectare. The draft plan of subdivision as revised provides approximately 6.8 dwelling units per site hectare and meets or exceeds the minimum lot frontage and area requirements in the zoning bylaw. Within the context of the larger surrounding neighborhood, lot sizes and frontage vary considerably. This ranges from a few remaining large estate lots located south of Lakeshore Road West to lots north of Lakeshore Road West, which are relatively smaller and have less lot frontage. As the large estates lots to the south of Lakeshore Road West have developed over time, the subdivided lots have generally met or exceeded the minimum lot frontage and area requirements of the RL1 zone. And the areas that have been identified in the staff report are outlined in blue on this slide. Staff have reviewed section 1119 of the Livable Oakville plan, which provides criteria to maintain and protect the existing neighborhood character. This is outlined in more detail in the staff report. However, I'd like to draw your attention to 2 matters. Number 1, in terms of the dwelling design, the priority lots adjacent to Lakeshore Road West and the waterfront lots, which will be subject to full site plan control, and the remainder of the lots, that would be the interior lots, will be subject to architectural control. Number 2, the proposed dwellings on the east side of the new public road So that's backing onto Shorewood Place. We'll have a rear yard to rear yard condition with those dwellings. At least 10.5 meter of separation distance will be provided to the rear yard. And through the plan of subdivision, the preservation of the existing trees along the boundary of the site will be advanced. The grade of the proposed roadway was also lowered to the extent possible to assist in minimizing the number of walkout lots adjacent to the dwellings on Shorewood Place and to minimize the appearance of 3-story facades in the rear. The urban design brief provides that second-story living space is to be incorporated within the roof line, particularly for the rear elevations, to ensure that none of the homes will have a greater than 2-story appearance from the rear, in keeping with the surrounding area. In terms of tree preservation, and through the staff focus on the red oak tree, which is tree number 788, which is located adjacent to the Shorewood Place pathway. And this tree was raised by council at the statutory public meeting and by the public through submissions as a significant tree. So since this statutory public meeting, the applicant undertook exploration with airspace technology to assess the potential impact of construction of stormwater and sanitary services in proximity to this tree. Based on the results of this assessment, a 7.5 meter tree protection zone is recommended. To preserve this tree, as a condition of approval, staff are recommending that the owner be required to use minimally invasive construction techniques adjacent to this tree and implement satisfactory agricultural measures such as root pruning to mitigate long-term tree injury. Further, tree protection will be required to be erected around this tree with limited grading within the tree protection zone. In addition, through the plan of subdivision, the existing Shorewood Place walkway abutting Lot 9, that's the waterfront lot, will be required to be widened by 2.5 meters, which will result in this tree being partially town-owned as a boundary tree, and that will provide a higher level of protection in the long term. As part of the plan of subdivision, the owner will be required to dedicate all lands below the stable top of bank to the town at no cost, and a park block along the lake at no cost to the town. The owner will also be required to design and implement the linear waterfront park at its cost, which would be reimbursable as town works to the upset limit in accordance with the town's most recently approved development charge study. The shoreline protection works required by the plan of subdivision are expected to be peer reviewed at the owner's cost and will be required to be constructed to current standards prior to registration of the subdivision. As outlined in more detail in the staff report, the technical review of the application addressed a number of other items. These matters have been addressed as outlined in the staff report, and the site design will be further advanced through clearance of the subdivision conditions. In terms of public comments, at the statutory public meeting, through comments received from the public, tree protection and alignment of the proposed public road with Morden Road were raised as concerns. Both matters have been reviewed and addressed in the staff report. More specifically, tree protection measures have been detailed in this presentation and in the staff report, and given the geometry of the proposed intersection and relatively low traffic volumes generated by the proposed development, there's no concern with the location of the proposed public road in relation to Morden Road. Staff is satisfied that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statements, conforms or does not conflict with all applicable provincial plans, conforms with the Region of Halton Official Plan and Livable Oakville Plan, has regards for matters of provincial interest, and represents good planning. Staff recommends approval of the draft plan of subdivision as the requirements listed on this slide have been met. In conclusion, Your Worship, staff put forth the following recommendation for Council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I have to say that with regard to the linear park, former Mayor Harry Barrett, who passed only last year, would have been proud because he is the one who gave us the policy that leads to this extension of the linear park, and eventually his hope was that we would have all of it in the public, but this is a a wonderful achievement. I thank you for the report. Council, do you have questions? Councillor Duddick.
Just one quick question. I know that you had referenced the fact that the interior of the site is going to be subject to architectural design and other elements. I guess my one concern is there are some substantially large trees in the interior of the property, as well as trees bounding on the west side as well. But the ones that are in the interior of the property, I know that when we went through development over on Shorewood, sometimes it was a matter of reconfiguring a driveway to ensure the retention of a tree. And I just put that forward that maybe when we see the siting of these trees and you get down to the actual lot design, working with the applicant in regards to preserving where possible, that would be great.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hazard-Thiel.
I just, first of all, thank you for your presentation and thank you for bearing with the late hour. In terms of the design of the linear waterfront park, I just wanted to clarify what level of involvement there'll be from the public and parks and open space on the actual accessibility of the waterfront and that park area.
Through you, Your Worship, as a condition of draft plan approval, the owner will retain a landscape architect, and Parks and Open Space will be reviewing those plans. The preliminary design put forward would include an extension of the pathway along the waterfront park. It could include a barrier along the waterfront because it's a significant change in grade between the linear waterfront park and the shoreline. And the applicant will essentially have to submit the plans and they'll be reviewed by staff.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Chisholm.
Just for clarity, the waterfront, the linear waterfront park is coming back to site plan for approval. Is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, the linear waterfront park won't come back for site plan approval, but the lots, the waterfront lots adjacent to that park will be required to go through the site plan process.
Thanks for the clarification.
Councillor Hazard-Thiel.
Is there a way to make the linear park have to come back to site plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Is there, can I ask a question in terms of that? Is the desire to have some community consultation around the linear park? Because we could perhaps speak to Parks and Open Space about building that into that process. So there could be some dialogue with that plan with the community as an informal, voluntary component.
So I'd look to the councillors for the ward, but I just, given the importance waterfront it continues to be in terms of public use of the waterfront and respecting sort of that design needs to evolve potentially for access both off the water and viewing the water. I'm just asking the question, could we evolve the process to make sure there is a consultation of some sort?
Certainly, a consultation can be done by Parks and Open Space without any difficulty at all. They have that, and they can take that as your question will alert them to the need to do it. Councillor Chisholm?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to add to that, may I suggest that is a very good idea. Knowing full well we've had some challenges with the development down at Waterworks in Tannery Park in the past, and the participation of the residents there was very strong. So I would anticipate we'll probably have that same situation. So in order to alleviate any concerns, that might be the best possible solution at this time. Thank you.
Great. So this is Ward 2. The hour is late. The only listed delegations are from the proponent, and the custom is to do that in case there's anything to answer. Are there other members of the public with information for council on this? I see none, so I'll look to, oh, sorry. Yes, sir? come on down and introduce yourself for the clerk. Share your information.
Worship and councilors, thank you. First of all, my one question is how you knew I was going to be here tonight such that you scheduled this as the very last item, but anyway.
It's out of our high regard for your many contributions to the town.
Well, I must say I'm most impressed with how sensitive you are and how much time is given to trees. That's one of my other loves. I'm not talking lights today, but the tree side of things. And in fact, there's 2 trees that I had designated or brought to the attention, Kathy's attention, that they're about 5-foot diameter at the bottom of the trail there coming along beside Shorewood. And it's also very close to where there is, I don't know about the current plan, but one of the early plans showed the little walkway of joining from the Majestic property over to the walkway down to the excuse me, the shoreline park. And I just hate for somebody to look at that plan and say, well, can't have a tree there. We got to put this little path in. Oops, we shouldn't have done that. Well, that's too late. And you never take these for granted. It's going to be a beautiful thing. I'm glad you commented regarding that shoreline park. And as you go further west, there's a tremendous opportunity. But there's a spot there that's probably from here to where you're sitting, where it joins up with Appleby. We could go all the way from Birchill area all the way through and loop in. I don't know whether that's ever possible, but it is such a short distance. It's a shame that it can't at some point in time. Anyway, thank you. I hope that somebody will check those 2 trees down there, and I appreciate your comment about some of the other trees that were on that property and the interior. It just it breaks my heart when I go by some of the areas, they might have been farmland with fringe trees, whatever, but they go in and they chop everything down and then start to build. It's a travesty, so I'm hoping that a little extra effort, of watching what has to come down versus what really they could work around with a little ingenuity. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for mentioning Oakville's very proud leadership in tree protection. I make so bold as to say we have the toughest tree protection in the country.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I must say, it really renewed me. It's been a while since I've been out to one of the council meetings, but the level of detail, the volume, of detail that you have to go through, you're to be commended on. You're doing a fabulous job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Councillor Duddeck, Councillor Chisholm, which of you wants to move the entire motion, including your extra bit? Are you, sorry, Peter?
No, I thought there's someone.
Oh, if you have, come on down then.
Mayor Burton, members of council, it's Bruno Nazicone on behalf of Majestic Edge Estates. I just wanted to reinforce the points you've raised with respect to the trees. Councilor Duddeck, I have no issue with your motion with respect to lots 2 to 8 and the additional work that is required. I want to thank staff and Mr. Barrett and the group that was working diligently with us as we were going through these various last stages of the getting to this report stage. So I just wanted to make that point clear. We look forward to moving this towards final registration. There are conditions in here notwithstanding that may require some clarification, including meeting and confirming with Conservation Halton as well, because there are 3 lots that require special permits. These are the lots that will be backing onto the future park that you will be obtaining through the work that we've done. We've hired not 1, not 2, but more than 3 consultants just on that issue alone with respect to the shoreline protection works. And we have not completed that just yet because we have to also pursue the peer review stage. Again, we're prepared to do that, but we'd certainly like to make sure that we continue and have the full cooperation as we have so far with the levels of staff that we've been dealing with. So thank you very much, and those are my comments.
Thank you very much for your comments, and I'll compliment you. Your project has been a model, as far as I can tell, in terms of the feedback I get from all the agencies and the staff. So you've been good to work with.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Dudek is moving the recommendation by staff and her addition. Councillor Chisholm, what are you? Oh, you're going to vote for it. We're in a hurry to vote. All right. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that does carry. Thank you, everybody. As I said, this would make Harry proud. Number 5, the recommendation report for the draft plan of condominium for Ankara Realty, the Remington Group, George Savage, and River Trail Common. And this is accompanied with a presentation by Melissa Dalrymple, who's back. And as she prepares to present, I can advise you that we have no registered delegations on this file. Are you serious? Is there a member of council who needs this presentation, given that we're all very familiar with the file? Ms. Dalrymple, thank you for being ready to do it. I wish I'd known this earlier. When you finished your last one, you could have left earlier.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar, are you moving the recommendation? Ward 7, which of you would like to arm wrestle your way to moving it?
Before we move, we have like 2 questions, if that's okay.
Oh, Ms. Dalrymple, it's a good thing you didn't leave yet.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Just wanted to run through a few questions. For the report and the final approval came from council in 2007, is that correct? Or 2017, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the final site plan approval was issued in November 2017.
Perfect. And then from the report, we can see that this development is basically underway, but there's a request to rezone it as a condominium. Do I have that right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, it isn't a rezoning application at this stage. It's what's called a draft plan of condominium.
Excellent.
So it relates just to tenure of the common element road.
Excellent, okay. And then on the subject of common elements, so we're talking about roads, we're talking about an outdoor activity space. Is there a third piece as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the common element condominium contains a roadway, that common amenity area, sidewalks, as well as 4 visitor parking spaces.
And once these items are part of a condominium, the town wouldn't be on the hook for taking carriage of snow removal and those types of things, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, the town wouldn't be on the hook for any maintenance. That would be borne by the condominium corporation.
Excellent. And then just kind of 2 other side questions. What's the statutory requirement for commentary from the public on something like this? Is it 20 days, 30 days, 40 days?
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, the Planning Act doesn't require that we provide notice in response to common element condominium applications. As a courtesy, we do provide a notice.
Okay.
In this case, there was, so it was a notice of complete application that went out. It went out in November. There's no timeline or deadlines associated with that notice. But we would assume that if someone receives the notice and within a reasonable amount of time, they would respond.
Excellent. So this went, just wanted to make sure I got my timeline correct. That was in November, this past year?
That's correct.
Okay. So from November until now, we haven't received any information from anybody in the public about this? Okay, perfect. And then my last question, what are the exact requirements with regard to parking here? You mentioned that there's 4 additional visitor parking spaces. How many parking spaces are attached to each one of the condos?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the North Oakville zoning bylaw requires that a minimum of 1 space be provided per townhouse. There are 32 townhouses that are proposed. Each townhouse unit provides 2 parking spaces for residents for a total of 64 parking spaces. And further, the North Oakville zoning bylaw has no requirement for visitor parking within a townhouse development, and 4 parking spaces have been approved as part of the site plan application.
So just for clarity, we're above whatever the bylaw requires. Perfect. That's all I have right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your report. Councillor Sandu covered most of my questions. I don't have any problems with this, subject to the conditions that are in the report. My only comment is on the visitor parking, and I've brought this up many times before. I don't think it's adequate, and as I've shared with staff and some of the council members, I will be bringing forward a request for a report on reviewing the parking standards, especially when it comes to visitor parking, because I realize that these decisions were made in the past, but since then there has been a lot of development in the ward. We're looking at properties just adjacent to this as well that are going to be under development, and I think that our visitor parking and parking standards, again, do need to be reviewed. So we can look forward to that at our next meeting. Thank you.
All right, we need a motion from somebody. Councillor Sandu, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you, everyone. Item number 6, where did it go? The population forecast for Ward 7 and factors required to establish need for facilities. We have a presentation available from Commissioner Bell. Does Ward 7 want a presentation on this? No. Commissioner Bell?
Just a comment. I mean, as Ward 7 councillor, we have read the report, but if somebody has not, then I would like the presentation for the benefit of all of council.
Oh, well.
So if you can direct that question to the rest of council as well, that'd be great.
So I only need one councillor to want a presentation, to fire up a presentation.
I'm good.
You're good. Everybody else is good. Commissioner Bell, you can stand down. We need a motion to receive.
Sorry, Mayor Byrne. We have a couple of questions, though.
We are ready for your questions. Commissioner Bell, you're on deck now.
No, it's okay, actually, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell, for your presentation. I just have a few questions, really. I'm actually looking at page 177 of the report, and we're looking at current and future population forecasts for Ward 7. In the first or second sentence there, it says that forecast is periodically updated by staff. What's periodic? How often is that updated?
Through your worship, to the councillor. So we undertook the review back in 2015, and Mott Watson provided us a base model. Since that time, they've updated the base model to allow us to enter real-time building permit data. So I believe it's indicated in the report that the numbers we're showing here are taken right up to and including December 31st of 2018. We plan on doing that every 6 months, but we could do it every week if we wanted to. We have that ability.
Okay. So along the same line, so if we're adding building permit data to the information that we've already received, how many houses are there currently in the ward? How have we updated that? And we can come back. We can take it offline.
Yep.
Yeah. And then if we have the houses, so this is my second question, is probably just a follow-up for another offline conversation. If we have the houses for how many houses are in the ward, can we also have an indication of how many people are in those houses? How is that calculated?
Through your worship, to the councillor. So the housing, the persons per household, this is a very good question, by the way. So we're seeing more people in apartments where we didn't before. So typically we rely on the Census Canada information that would have come out, I believe, in 2015. Actually, 2015 is a year, but it rolls out the year after. It takes them a little time to get it done. So our information is only as good as that. And I would be my understanding that there have been changes in trends in people per dwelling unit. We will not be able to get at that information until 2022. So the census is 2021, and it rolls out the following year with that type of information.
So just want to clarify your comment. we are using whatever the ratio is from the 2016 census. Am I understanding that correctly?
Through your worship, my understanding is we use the persons per household as provided for Oakville data from the federal government through the census work.
Excellent, okay.
And it's it breaks down on building types, so single detached versus a townhouse versus apartment dwellings. There's different numbers for each category.
Got it. Okay, I think.
Sorry,
think
just
that's
to
okay for now.
interject
Go ahead.
there, I just was hoping that, I know it's not in the report, but if you could share those numbers with us, just so we can understand how we got to the calculation of the current population, because as you mentioned, it's based off of building permits and households, number of households, but from door knocking, you know, I know that there is a lot of full families there, a lot of kids that are still at home, kids coming back from university, residing at home, and this all came from parking issues, of course, because there's not enough room to park. So that's how I know that. So I'm curious to know what that ratio is per household. So if we could see that information, and then I think we had a question on the hotspots as well. The mapping on the hotspots. Could we also get a figure on exactly, I mean, we see the map that shows, the heat map, sorry. Could we get an actual number of how many households in Ward 7 are currently using other facilities in the area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could I get clarification on what you mean by other facilities in the area?
Oh, sorry, the other recreation centers. So right now on the heat map, it's just dots, but I mean, if we could get an actual number of the number of households, for example, that are using or registered in programs at Glen Abbey and Iroquois Ridge, that would be helpful as well.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the way we don't normally calculate by household, because you may only have one, you may have a family of 4, but only one person may be registered. We do it by individual registrations.
Okay.
But we could provide that.
Okay, yeah, that would be fine. Okay, yes, and thank you. Thank you for putting this report together. As I mentioned to staff earlier, I know that for new counselors like myself, this information is very useful, and I know it might be redundant to some of the other counselors, but it's very helpful for us to have that knowledge just so we can explain it to the residents reaching out to us for community centers. And although there's not a need for a community center right now, I do still believe that a decade from now might be too far out. So I do look forward to population estimates when we have more of a accurate figure based on the census that we can gather, and hoping to revisit this in the near future. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I've forgotten now, which one of you is moving receipt of this? Councillor Sandu, was that you? Thank you. Councillor Adams, you have a question?
I just thought on this question of people per household question, I believe we've got the same kind of number going back several census points, and I think it might be helpful for the council members to see how that's changed over time, because it has changed, and I know that we've tracked it. So if you're putting it together already, it might be useful to put that time frame on as well.
I was going to suggest that we put a background information memo out to council on a little bit more detail in terms of the persons per household, how it's changed per unit type, and that would include all the information on the recreation. So we'll bring it back to you in terms of an information memo in your council packages.
I think that'd be super. May I call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Now, we need, we've reached the end of the agenda. If only we can have a motion to rise and report to council. Councillor Lischina, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and has made recommendations on public hearing items 1, 2, 3, and discussion items 4, 5, and 6. And I need a mover and seconder for my report. Councillor Elgar, thank you. Councillor Robertson, thank you. All those in favor? That carries. The report is adopted. We now need a mover and seconder for the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of a meeting of council. Councillor Knoll and Councillor Grant, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Subject to correction by the clerk, I believe we have now finished all of our work. I thank everybody for your time and attention. It's been terrific working with you, and you've certainly earned your spurs tonight. We're adjourned.